nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We have only two short agenda items, but it will take a long time, I believe, for us to get through the information that we have. I want to start by thanking Scott and his staff, Brian Greenleaf, Brian Henriksen, the administrative team, and the many teachers that have worked to help provide the additional suggestions that we will be processing and reviewing tonight. I want those folks on the phone that I know are speaking tonight. We appreciate you signing up. Engaging and hearing your feedback is critically important. The board listens to what you're saying. Many of us have been contacted individually. And again, we appreciate all the information you're providing so we can help make the most informed decisions and do what's best for our students, staff, and our community at large. So with that being said, again, we have a lot to cover tonight. I want to jump right into it, turn it over to Dr. Nickel, and then I believe we will be having a couple of presentations by Mr. Greenleaf, Mr. Henriksen, and then lots of discussion. But I do apologize. I want to follow it in order. The citizen and staff forum, I think, is first, Scott, so I'm going to tackle that one on the agenda. We have several individuals who have signed up to speak this evening. And if, Jen, if you're ready, as far as logging those people in, our first speaker is Steve Bernard, the art teacher at Center and Crystal Lake School. Mr. Bernard, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very good. It's nice to see you without a mask. I see you every morning at drop off and pick up, and my daughter loves your class. So glad to see you. Now I actually know I remember what you look like. It's been a while.
Thank you, Michael. I know it's nice to see everybody's full faces, I think, instead of their top halves all the time.
They haven't banned us wearing masks on Zoom yet, but that might be coming. I don't know. We'll see. All right, Mr. Bernard, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'll try to be as brief as possible, everybody. But, certainly the art department, each of us has written a letter that we, might eventually present to the board members if they want it. But certainly we can read it to you and kind of flesh out, what our concerns would be. OK, so, of course, my name is Stephen Bernard. I've had the privilege to teach art to the children of Ellington for nearly 25 years. This town has become a fixture in my life as much as the town I grew up in. Having been here this long, I would like to comment on the negative impact a reduction of staff would mean for the art program. When I was initially hired, the art department consisted of 3 full-time elementary art teachers. Scheduling consisted of 5 one-hour classes each day and provided an authentic artistic experience for students with fewer transitions. This model existed for 12 years until the significant reduction in force with the economic downturn in 2009. Part of that reduction was 1 full-time art teacher, which resulted in 1/3 of the art curriculum being eliminated, with a reduction of contact time from 60 minutes to 40, along with cutting transition times between classes to 5 minutes. With the average day consisting of 7 classes and little transition time, the unfortunate consequence was the streamlining or elimination of units, which required extended time to run effectively. Clearly, the 7-class-a-day schedule was having a detrimental effect on the program. With the art program struggling, and not fulfilling its potential for students, Aaron McGurk, the curriculum director at the time, lobbied for a part-time art teacher to be added to the budget. It took years to work itself up the chain and culminated in 2017 with Amber's position being added. With demands of the block schedule, 5th and 6th grade students switching teachers for academic instruction, and providing common planning time for classroom teachers, the present staffing level has allowed the flexibility to accomplish these goals. While scheduling is currently difficult, a reduction of staff would certainly send shockwaves to the rest of the schedule in the future, no doubt exacerbated by the unknowns of COVID in the fall. Upon listening to previous Board of Education meetings, questions have been raised about comparing art staff to traditional classroom teachers. Also, I believe questions have been raised regarding staffing levels of each unified arts department. The comparison that has been offered between an art and traditional classroom teacher in terms of contact and transition time being similar is simply not applicable in my opinion. While classroom teachers no doubt face their own challenges, there are differences. An art teacher has a finite amount of time for closure, cleanup, and set up again within a 5-minute window, doing it for multiple grade levels entering and exiting the room, each class requiring different materials and equipment, and serving various ages and abilities with different expectations and accommodations is unique to specialist teachers. We have roughly 700 students moving through our classroom on a weekly basis as compared to 25. In regards to staffing levels, If we offer a comparison between art and the two other specials areas not facing cuts, music and phys ed, art is currently the smallest, even prior to potentially losing the 0.4 position. Next year, if the 0.4 cut comes to fruition, the elementary schools will have a combined 4 full-time music teachers, 3 full-time physical education teachers, and only 2 full-time art teachers, all serving the same number of students. And while the contact time of these two other areas are clouded by health, course, and band obligations, under no circumstances will any be teaching 7 classes on any day. And upon scrutiny of the present schedules of music and phys ed, both have flexibility built into their schedule by teaching 5, 4, or even 3 classes a day in some instances. These openings allow the opportunities for both departments to pursue setting up equipment, instruments, arranging performances, writing curriculum, designing rubrics or assessments, along with other pursuits to make their respective programs better. The art department merely asks for the present schedule of a maximum of 6 classes per day to continue, with current staffing intact, to have the same opportunities to operate and improve our program as well. It is also legitimate to make a comparison between the block scheduling of elementary unified arts and secondary schedules because of their similarity. If high school teachers are contractually obligated to teach 5 42-minute classes a day, get a stipend if they teach a 6th, and under no circumstances teach a 7th period, how is it even remotely equitable to expect elementary art teachers next year to have 7 40-minute classes per day for 4 out of the 5 days of the week? In closing, I want to express some personal feelings regarding the possibility of Amber losing her job and the elementary art program regressing with the potential staff reduction. When teachers across the district returned to in-person teaching last fall, there was much uncertainty and anxiety regarding risk levels. As a society, it seemed we were overwhelmed with contradictory information about how dangerous it was to children, adults, transmission rates, whether schools should remain open or closed. And despite the anxiety, Ellington teachers entered the breach because first and foremost, that's what teachers do, teach. We are also filled with the determination to bring normalcy and a sense of happiness to our students, a community of in-person learners that could still feel safe. As specials teachers, logic dictated we're even more exposed to infection based on seeing every student in school, some of us in multiple schools, and coming into contact with every cohort. And we did it because while this extraordinary event has occupied our professional and personal lives, it was something we couldn't control. And so we all navigate each day together, finding coping mechanisms for our anxiety and press on because we know the importance of what we do. However, when we return in the fall, with the residue of COVID still and probability part of our lives, if obstacles are added that aren't the results of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, but rather decisions made by our district, then I can't help feel a level of sadness and disappointment. So thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Very informative, and we appreciate you taking the time to present that information to us for consideration. Our next speaker tonight is Amy Dimkowski, art teacher from Windermere. Jen, if you want to switch to Amy, please.
Can you see me?
Yes, you can.
Okay, can you hear me okay too?
Yes,
okay.
you can. Please, Amy, go right ahead. The floor
All
is
right,
yours.
thanks. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Amy Dimkowski, and I am the full-time art teacher at Windermere School. I've been teaching here for the last 22 years. A couple of weeks ago, I was informed that the 0.4 art position was under consideration for reduction in the proposed budget. Earlier today, Brian Hendrickson arranged a meeting including elementary principals, Christy Laporte, Mark Mailer, Steve Bernard, and myself. In this meeting, Brian let us know that the funding for the 0.4 art position was found due to retiring staff. He let us know that he was going to ask the board tonight to add this position back into the budget. I am here because I believe that the members of the Ellington Board of Education need to know how the elementary art program will change for students without the 0.4 position currently held by Amber Howard. When I speak of scenarios we would be faced with, it's not based on projections or what I think may occur. I speak with the firsthand experiences of having taught three full-time elementary teachers, 2.4 elementary art teachers, and 2 full-time elementary art teachers at various points throughout my career. Among the negative impacts, the reduction of the 0.4 art position will have an effect on students that include the types of materials used and the curriculum taught, the quality of teacher to student connections made, the level of communication with classroom teachers and parents, the amount of actual class time, not including prep, setup, and cleanup, less time for more in-depth projects, the amount of time required for cleaning due to current COVID standards, and voluntary student groups that seek out my room as an artistic outlet, one-on-one instruction, and artistic enrichment at recess. The return provided by Amber's 0.4 position far exceeds the minimal investment. Amber has been an integral part of our department's growth and Ellington Elementary students' art experience overall. Since she was hired, she has designed and taught a recess art class, an after-school art program, summer art classes, and put in many more hours of instruction and contributions far beyond her documented job description. She is fully committed to the children of Ellington and passionate about art and all it has to offer her students. She has addressed children's social and emotional needs long before the pandemic began. Her classroom door was always filled with covered with artwork and sweet letters from her students. I would confidently argue that Amber's 0.4 position should be increased to a minimum of 0.5 instead of being eliminated. The social and emotional well-being of our children should be a priority. Art nurtures our children socially and emotionally and improves their overall well-being. Every year, I have many students seek out my art room, unsolicited, for a place for self-expression. They naturally come together on their own. Recess becomes an opportunity for students to gather, feel safe, create art, or just talk. Students bond with each other, and I am able to connect with them on a deeper level. In the years that I have taught the entire school by myself, I have sadly had to eliminate these gatherings because I am feverishly cleaning from my morning classes, prepping for my afternoon classes, addressing any and all concerns from earlier classes, connecting with parents, planning new lessons, and if time allows, eat my lunch. I share a deep mutual respect for classroom teachers. Many of them are my closest friends. We respect our professional areas and recognize that we cannot be compared. A comparison of my position to others cannot and should not be made. The time that I spend in direct contact with students must be balanced with the time for me to prepare for meaningful learning experiences for each and every class and every grade level. Our youngest elementary students we teach are not as self-sufficient and require an enormous amount of preparation, hands-on guidance, and attention. In conclusion, I'm asking for your support of the 0.4 art position. It is imperative that you understand the very real implications of reducing Amber's 0.4 position. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Very well stated. We appreciate your input and we'll take it under consideration. Our next speaker is Amber Howard, art teacher, Windermere and Center School. Amber, are you there?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can hear you. I don't see you, but I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Howard, and I'm the 0.4 elementary art teacher here in Ellington. I teach one day at Center Elementary and one day at Windermere. I started the position in 2017. After accepting this position, my husband and I purchased a home here in Ellington, where we would go on to start our family with our son, James, who is now almost 2 years old, and will soon join the Ellington public school system. We love it here. There's been a lot of discussion on the 0.4 art position being cut from the budget. I learned today that it is now going to be recommended to be included in the budget. This is good news because if the proposed 0.4 art position were to be eliminated, I strongly believe it would be a detriment to the students of the Ellington Public Schools. With this change, the high quality art experiences would not survive. Furthermore, if my colleagues are faced with a 7-class schedule per day, they will in fact be forced to do less involved projects with students. I know that for many kids, their main reason for coming to school is for their art classes and their art teachers. Students consistently share that art is one of their favorite parts of their school day. Since my start here in 2017, I have built strong relationships with students and families. My passion is teaching art. Art is a creative outlet for children, and in this pandemic, I believe it's more important now than ever. We should be looking for ways to expand art and art enrichment. The data shows that the increased levels of art in a student's life yields higher academic scores and better overall social and emotional health. I've done many exciting things here in Ellington, such as the statewide fire prevention poster contest, Art Center East art shows, gallery night art exhibitions, and I've also developed and run summer and after-school art classes. Those enriching activities would be gone. In 2017, I started a voluntary art club for students during my lunch period. I believe that if staff is reduced, the number of course sections are increased, the remaining staff will have no time to provide enrichment activities like an art club. Over the last few years, I've been working with my principals and assistant superintendent around ways of expanding the art program, such as offering more enrichment as well as gifted and talented options to our students. I have also had discussions around best practices of keeping kids engaged and learning. In my experience, I've been a part of a program called Arts in the Mainstream, which is a multidisciplinary approach that integrates general education curriculum and art curriculum. It's a collaborative approach and delves into a deeper learning experience for students and is highly motivating and engaging to the student population. Well, how does it work? I work with classroom teachers around their curriculum and develop art projects that enhance learning for students of all ability levels. By doing so, we can meet and reach more of our student population, especially those who may be struggling academically or those with increased social and emotional challenges brought on by outside stressors. Another one of my goals for Ellington is to see a much stronger presence of art throughout our buildings and community. One creative way to put in more enrichment into our students' lives is through art integration. We can create things like painted murals, clay mosaics, sculptures to be a part of our school's landscape. We can turn students' classrooms into what they're learning about with art. I have seen the positive effects of our integration I have seen the positive effects our integration has on students and parents. Art has the power to drive a whole community with wonder, curiosity, and positivity if we let it. Enrichment art activities like this empower our students, parents, and community, and also allow students to take an active role in being part of making school their own. And what this does is make school a place kids want to be. This kind of enrichment is what kids remember about their time at school. Any decrease in staffing will make this kind of goal unrealistic. As a visual artist, one of the first things I noticed that when I walked into the Ellington Public Schools was how I wanted to be a part of getting students, parents, and community involved in enhancing these spaces and making them more artistically inspired. I feel I come at a high value to our district, and what I can offer in return is so much more than my cost as a .4 art teacher who does not receive health care or retirement benefits. In closing, I understand the board and administration are looking for more enrichment opportunities for our students, which I believe we can work together on through arts integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Very well said. Appreciated. And we will definitely be taking your comments under consideration for the recommendations that have been presented to us. And again, thank you for taking the time to present that. Our next speaker tonight is Jillian Ziegler, who is a library media specialist from Ellington High School. Jillian, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you. Oh, now I can see you. Hi, Jillian. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Again, I'm Jillian Ziegler, and I am the library media specialist at Ellington High School. I requested to speak briefly tonight as a member of the larger Ellington Public Schools library media team, which is what we truly see ourselves as, and to make a little introduction before my colleagues speak. I think that we all hold some values at heart in terms of our vision of the Ellington High School graduate, and these values are directly supported by library media specialists in the district. For one, we see our students as discerning, careful consumers of information in a digital age. For two, we really see digitally savvy citizens who know how to use technology, how to integrate it into their learning, and how to use it effectively and safely. And absolutely, last but not least, we see our students as readers, as literate, as literary, and as lovers of the written word. And these are all attributes that I attempt to support through my program at the high school. And I want to briefly mention the sort of trickle-down effect that a reduction in library media programs at the elementary and middle school levels may have. When I have students in the high school whom I'm working with on research methods, and they know how to use a database, that is indication that they are receiving a strong grounding at the middle school. When I have students who come into the library and they know what it is that they want to read and they merely use me as a guide to find books, it's because they have had years of contact, direct contact with a professional librarian. This is my 15th year in education in total, though only my 4th at Ellington Public Schools. And I will say that a student who is 15 or 16 years old and who hasn't caught that spark of reading yet is so hard for me to reach. It's so hard to imbue with that sense of the love of reading that is the foundation of literacy. And so I know how important it is to develop that early on. I'll lastly close with a personal anecdote. My son and daughter attend a school in a different district with no librarian in the middle school or the elementary school. And fortunately, my husband and I make it a practice to take them to the public library and to make book recommendations and to do everything for them that I do at work. And I know that the other students in the school whose parents don't have that ability are not receiving that same input. And it's unfortunate to think that students might lack in our excellent program the invaluable impact of a highly trained professional who can create that love of reading and that spark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jillian. Again, very well spoken and lots of passion. We appreciate that and we'll take it under consideration. Our next speaker is Krista Brogel, Library Media Specialist at Crystal Lake School. Mrs. Brogel, can you hear me?
Yes, hi. How are you?
Hey, very good, Krista. Good to see you. The floor
too.
is yours.
Thank you. My name is Krista Brogel, and I am the Library Media Specialist at Crystal Lake School and currently at Center School as well, in addition to the 5th grade distance learning science teacher this year. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. When I was a young child, I dreamed of being a librarian because I thought it was cool that they got to stamp the due date in books. Of course, now that I'm a library media specialist, I know that it is so much more than that. It has been nothing short of magical to teach and to build relationships with students across the entire school through my role as the library media specialist. When I think about our roles, I can compare it to a multi-layered cake. Building a collection filled with materials for all levels of reading across diverse interests is an amazing base. We offer students materials that interest them and support their learning through individual help with browsing, book talks, and book tastings. Collaboration with staff members to support their curriculum with both print and digital materials, or co-teaching lessons on poetry or research skills is always time well spent. Another layer offers unique opportunities for students to shine or explore their interests. Many personal stories come to mind, but in the interest of time, I will just share one. I offered book clubs and research clubs to 2nd grade readers who were recommended by their teachers, beyond my regular schedule. As I picked up my small group of 2nd graders and headed back to the media center, one boy looked up at me with a shy smile and said, "I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I'm nervous and excited right now." And I asked him to tell me more. He replied, I'm nervous because I'm doing something new for the first time, but I'm more excited because I get to do something new and I know it's going to be great. And it was. Additionally, interested sixth graders have participated in our Junior Library Assistance Program. They gained responsibility for helping set up displays, recommending books to order, and so much more. Students have been able to participate in plugged and unplugged recess sessions where they can explore activities such as coding, working with our robots, origami, and more. Through our leadership, we facilitate the hour of code for all students across the building. Exposing children to the growing field of computer science is always received well by our native digital learners. Our older students have the opportunity to assist our younger students as coding ambassadors, which they train for under our supervision. Students also have the opportunity to explore many top-notch Connecticut Nutmeg Book Award nominees and then attend a Nutmeg Book Award lunch that we offer, where we share ideas about literature and have some fun too. Additional layers of enrichment opportunities are woven into our weekly lessons with exposure to all things Chromebook, with work in Google Apps. Breakout EDU activities are really popular. Students use problem-solving skills and collaboration to unravel multi-step puzzles. Technology-focused activities such as stop-motion animation, video creation in WeVideo, and digital citizenship are always favorites among the students, as well as creating in the makerspace. To add icing on this cake is the opportunity to coordinate school-wide activities and events such as visiting authors, Read Across America and activities, and summer reading celebrations. To sum up, Newbery Award-winning author Erin Entrada Kelly recently said these words on Twitter: "School librarians are like shepherds, leading readers where they need to go. We have many reasons to walk into libraries. There's something we need to learn maybe, or we want to find a book to make us laugh, or we need to cry. Perhaps we're there for an escape, or we just need a safe place to rest for a moment. No matter the reason, there's always a librarian right around the corner who has the answer to your question. What a gift they are." Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Brogel, and good to see you, and we appreciate your comments, and we will be taking those under consideration this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Beth Palasic. Beth, I hope I said your name correctly. Please correct me if I did not. Library Media Specialist from Windermere School.
You did. Thank you. It's not doesn't
welcome.
happen very often, so thank you.
I know the feeling. The floor is yours, Beth.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Beth Palasic, the Library Media Specialist at Windermere School and a current third grade distance learning teacher. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and I'm hopeful that you will see the passion, dedication, and flexibility we all have in working as media specialists in the Ellington community. The Media Center has evolved so much in the past few years. While it is a place where students come to find the latest addition to a beloved series, peruse our picture books, or devour graphic novels, it is no longer just a library. It's a space where they are welcome to explore, test out ideas, and work on projects they are passionate about. In our role as certified library media specialists, it is essential that we ensure our students can see themselves in the books they read. Doing this requires research and thoughtfulness to locate high-quality literature that reflects the student population we serve in our schools. On the other hand, it is also critical to continually monitor our collections to make sure they are current, accurate, and resonate with our students. Over the past few years, I've worked with countless students on projects that enhance and enrich the work that they're doing in their classrooms. For example, there's the group that was inspired by our recent global read aloud, A Long Walk to Water. We met in the makerspace and they designed, created, and tested water collection systems that could be used in their homes as ways to conserve water. This past year, with the help from an EduInnovate grant, we added a green screen and some additional video production equipment in the media center. Students were extremely excited to test this out. After doing lessons across many grade levels on how to use the green screen feature in WeVideo, I encourage students to think about how they could incorporate this technology to show their learning on a topic. Several sixth graders immediately booked time and created news reports for our social studies presentation, and we discovered some budding newscasters. I've also worked with many students who found a love for stop motion animation. Learning how to make Legos dance across the screen sparked their creativity and also gave them a safe space to come in, relax during recess. In our schools, we not only make meaningful connections with students through books, we also make important connections through activities like these. It has been my pleasure to invite students into the Media Center to let them imagine and explore, to guide them as they try out new experiences and discover new interests. I'd like to thank you again for this chance to share a glimpse into our library media centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plasek. We appreciate your comments, and we'll definitely take those under consideration tonight as well. Thank you very much. And our last scheduled speaker tonight is Lisa Palek, Library Media Specialist from Ellington Middle School. Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see you. Good to see you. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So I am Lisa Pollock, School Library Media Specialist at Ellington Middle School. I'm also currently teaching 6th grade reading for distance learner students. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. The library is a wondrous place. It has evolved from the traditional library media center into a library learning commons, a space where all members of the school community gather to learn, collaborate, invent, read, explore, innovate, and celebrate. Everyone is welcome, and we are there to offer support and guidance when needed. It is a safe space. I support social emotional learning. As you know, middle school can be a tough time as children become young adults looking for a sense of identity. As a leader in the school, I've collaborated with teachers to address diversity and social justice. I established a Reading Without Walls challenge, which encourages readers to look for books about people who don't look or live like themselves. It is also important for students to find books where they do see themselves. Rudine Sims Bishops first introduced this concept of books as windows, mirrors, and doors. She states, reading then becomes a means of self-affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. My initiative this year is to build a rainbow library, increasing the number of books that represent our LGBTQ+ community. As a certified teacher, I am thoughtful in this process, and I use my experience and expertise to curate our collection and programming that supports students in these self-discoveries. As media specialists, we work with students on print literacy, but also media and digital literacy. In our world of fake news and information overload, it is important to teach digital citizenship and skills necessary to navigate and select the most reliable information while recognizing bias and separating fact from fiction. I use my flexible schedule to collaborate with teachers across grades and content areas to teach our students to be responsible users of information. I am especially proud of the work I've done to establish our innovation zone and the enrichment opportunities it provides. In our digital lab and makerspace, students are able to use our resources to extend their learning and be creative. I've worked with students on stop motion, music recording, sewing, coding, many other types of projects. They dream it, we do our best to support it. Students come to the library as an extension of their classrooms, but there are also times when students are looking for extra things to do or a place to try out a new passion project. For example, there was a student who quickly grasped the concepts taught in science. For a period of time, instead of going to science, he came to the library to work with me. He created his own breakout box, a series of challenges for his classmates to complete, something like an escape room. Other students had to use what they had learned in that science unit in order to break out. I'll never forget watching his excitement. He was running around the library as his classmates completed those puzzles that he had set up. It reinforced learning for other students on his team, but also taught him some things about teaching, problem solving, and persistence. We ask that you please think of the work that we do when considering the proposal to eliminate 1.6 school library media specialists. It was stated that this reduction would cause minimal disruption of programming, but in our opinion, this loss would have a significant negative effect on student learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Palek. We really appreciate those comments very much. Very insightful. And I believe that concludes our speakers for this evening. Jen, there's nobody else. I want to make sure I'm looking at the correct list and I didn't miss anybody.
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn it over for the next agenda item, which is continued discussion and possible action on the 21-22 budget, just a reminder to board members and certainly for those joining us tonight, the only item right now that the Board of Education can take action on is the superintendent's proposed budget, which was shared with us on January 23rd, which reflects a 3.38% or 1.37 million and change increase of expenditures as compared to the current fiscal year for next year. There have been several recommendations made, many of which our staff have shared their comments and feedback on both today in public forum and in other capacities as well. And again, we appreciate that. So any motions that we make, any adjustments that we take action on tonight, just a reminder to board members, is against that original budget, because that's the only one that we have right now to react to. The rest are recommendations for us to make potential actions on and to take under consideration. So with that, Dr. Nickel, I know you wanted to share some information. You presented us with a couple of memos tonight, and I'm anxious to hear from both you, Mr. Greenleaf, and Mr. Henriksen, a little bit more about the information you shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porcaro. I appreciate the board being here tonight. Appreciate everyone listening on their phone and all of our staff who have come up and shown their passion for what they do on a daily basis. And it reminds me of the Seeds of Civility. And one of the tenets of the Seeds of Civility is to speak one's truth. And as you can see, our outstanding library media specialists and art teachers shared with you their passion and a lot of amazing contributions that they have made to the Ellington Public Schools, and that our children have benefited for many, many years from all of them. And that's why myself and our team, and I know their colleagues, and I know the Board of Education, I know I can speak for the board, are very proud of all of our teachers for that work. The arts are super, super important. Some elementary kids, some middle school kids, high school kids, they come to school just because of PE or art or music. That's their main driving force. That's what they get up out of bed in the morning and are so excited that it is a special day to go to art. Our library media centers are places where our kids congregate outside of their regular classes. They get to read, they get to interact, they get to use maker spaces. Super important. And we can't forget about our tech integrationists who play a role in supporting the library media specialists, who play a role in working as liaisons with the teachers to really have great enhancement and enrichment for all of our students and their learning. All is super important. It really is. And we have been proud over the last, this is my 6th year, my 6th budget. And I know previously in my tenure with Mr. Cullinan, we've been proud over the last 6 years to have moved budgets forward where we have really increased our teaching force, net positive in the elementary, net positive overall, enhanced various programs in different ways. And that has been wonderful. When we've had to eliminate positions, we're very proud that no certified teacher has ever lost their job. That is really important. We also know that the budget process, this is a team process, right? This is all of us collectively together. If you think about the Seeds of Civility, the first tenet is listen, observe, and reflect. And if you really think about our budget process to date, and this is credit to the Board of Education for requesting and recommending to the administration to involve building principals and teachers on a more prevalent in the process, We front loaded in December before we even developed the budget, where teachers and principals presented to the Board of Education. And that was fantastic. We're going on our 4th budget meeting, and we're going to have a 5th one, and that is just at the Board of Education level. Never mind the Board of Finance level, which will have several also. And when you really think about this, is a team process. And what's really important to understand is we are all on the same side. We all want the same things. We want amazing programs for our kids. We want to maintain all of our positions. They're all super important. At the budget presentation, the board is very well aware, and some teachers may not be. I know you have better things to do on a Saturday than watch a superintendent present the budget. But one of the things that we have mentioned is that there is a thin staffing model in Ellington. It's one of the reasons our per pupil expenditure is very low. That's not a good or a bad thing. That's just a reality of where we are at in the Ellington Public Schools. And we have been providing an outstanding education for decades here. And we will continue to do so. It's also important to understand that as a team, we all play different roles. We have different roles. We have different expertise. We have different perspectives. And it's all very hard and challenging, especially when reorganizations are recommended, whether it's in the budget process or outside of the budget process, when positions are recommended to be eliminated or added back in, because budget processes are fluid. And anytime you do those things, you make these recommendations that are very hard, it's emotional because you're dealing with people, their livelihood, you're dealing with people's professional lives. And the reason it's emotional is because they care, because they have a great deal of respect and passion for what they do. That's why they're in the profession. And that's why we're proud of our educators. And I do count our administrators as educators. We've all been teachers. We've all been at the building level in some form or fashion. Meet myself as a middle school social studies teacher and a high school history teacher. All the programming, all the educators, all the extracurricular activities that we have in this budget is important, is of great value to our children. Now, also the flip side is we all have a responsibility. When I say all, it means all, to also recognize and acknowledge that yes, moving the school district forward and providing an outstanding education is paramount. It's important. It helps for the livelihood and the development of the Ellington community. It gives people futures. But also, we have to couple that with thinking about the Ellington taxpayer dollars. The elected representatives of the Board of Education have a very difficult job to make tough decisions and approve a budget and move it to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance has a very difficult job. They're elected representatives. They also have to be thinking about the taxpayer dollars and the health of the community. And then, of course, the model that we have in Ellington, ultimately, the voters get to decide. They get to see what the proposed budget is in total for the town of Ellington and the Ellington Public Schools. They get to understand the mill rate and the impact on them financially and what they want to have in the town, what they want to have for their livelihood and their future, and they get to vote. So this is a long process, challenging process. Ellington has done it very well for a very long time, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Last week, I sent out a budget update to the staff. I sent this budget update after 3 meetings. So we had the superintendent proposed budget. That was a Saturday. Then on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, there was a finance committee and a Board of Education budget workshop. It was a timely communication because a lot of discussion had happened. Nothing had been final. And also, what many do not know, a lot of behind the scenes meetings with teachers and principals and meetings at the central office. There are hours upon hours upon hours spent thinking about all of the various variables that make this really challenging, but well worth the effort. Well worth the effort by all of us. Everyone that's participating in this process is to be commended. No question about it. The proposed budget was a 3.38% increase, as Mr. Porcaro stated, with added positions, not eliminated positions. Now, of course, there is a process, as I outlined, and the board directed us to look at the programs and different elements of the budget creatively and to reduce the budget. And it's a fine request. It's a very appropriate request. And we went to work to do that. As you know, over the last 3-4 years, and I know the board is very well aware of this, we are constantly looking at all programming, K through 12, trying to enhance it, trying to maintain it, trying to see if we can run it even more efficiently at a good cost to the taxpayers. Program improvement, program maintenance, program reorganization is all part of what great organizations do. Not an easy process, but just part of the change process that allows organizations to evolve and progress over time. And so we've done that within the budget process, and we've done that outside of the budget process. And that's what part of the role of the superintendent and the administration is. We were very pleased, and Mr. Greenleaf will, in a few minutes, be sharing one of the memos that kind of outlines some of the new proposals that we have, but we are very pleased to be able to recommend to the board to put back in the 0.4-hour teacher. If you recall, and Steve referenced this and mentioned Dr. McGurk, that I worked with Dr. McGurk, agreed with her assessment, agreed with your assessment. I believe we even had a meeting with the art teachers in the central office conference room to talk about this. And all of the points are valid and justified. No question about it. And so I agreed, and I recommended the 0.4-hour teacher. And the board agreed. And it was a good decision. And I think it's also a good decision to be putting it back in the budget if we can afford it. And that is what we're doing. And what I want to do is I want to provide a nod to Mark Mahler, Teachers Union President, because we work collaboratively with our union. And with his efforts of communicating out to some of our teachers, if they were thinking about retiring, and they could put in their letter now and we could be assured that they were retiring, then we can actually lower the budget by a certain amount of money. And that's fantastic. And when we were able to receive that with the cooperation of the union, and we thank you, Mark, that made it much easier to put back in the 0.4-hour teacher. And we recommend that the board consider that in their discussions. And we're pleased with that. The Library Media Specialist Program. It's a great program, as you heard. I don't have to repeat all the great, wonderful things that the teachers are doing there. I think one of the things that impressed me the most when I came to the school district, and I will give Dr. McGurk, I'll give Dave Pearson, Principal Pearson, and I'll give Principal Roberts and a host of other teachers a lot of credit of developing an amazing reading culture. They focused on it. They emphasized it. Outstanding reading culture that we have at the Ellington Public Schools. And if you're looking for high leverage strategies to increase all sorts of learning, the research will show, and Dr. Young will tell you that, if you can read really, really well, and you have a love for reading, you can do a lot of things in this world. And that's a testament to all that work. And our library media specialists, those media centers, they contribute greatly to that reading culture, and it's important. And we want to maintain and enhance it to the best of our ability. When we're looking at budget cuts, it's difficult. I have to say we do want to avoid teachers losing positions, meaning losing their job, their livelihood. That does factor in. We are human, just like you all, and it's not just a cold business decision. So when we see sometimes retirements and we can do attrition, namely one of our library media specialists who is outstanding, who retired, we consider that and we say, well, let's look at this program. We're looking at all the programs. If we reduce here, can we continue to maintain things? Can we continue to enhance it and come up with a model that is going to be beneficial and someone doesn't lose their job? That is a consideration. It's important. Also, when we considered the other 0.6 library media specialist up at Crystal Lake, very important position. If you recall, we've added to that position, I believe 0.2 or 0.1 over the years during my tenure. Why? Because it was important. It was a great investment. If that position remains to be eliminated, it's important to note that that individual in that position will be offered and will have a guarantee of a full-time position with an approximately $40,000 increase in pay. This is all evidence of us thinking about people, thinking about their livelihoods, trying to respect them as humans, while at the same time balancing the importance of trying to be responsible to the taxpayers, while at the same time thinking about how we can enhance and reorganize programming. What we propose for the library media specialist is not just simply cut the positions and move on and do without. If that was the recommendation, I wouldn't be very pleased as the board. But our recommendation, and for the second straight year, we are moving, transferring teaching positions from the high school, reallocating them to the elementary school. We're moving those positions down. The board has a priority of talented and gifted, and you know what? They should. It's an excellent priority. For too long, we have not provided that talented and gifted program that this district has needed, and we need to look at that. And enrichment goes hand in hand. There's a different definition between talented and gifted and enrichment, but that goes hand in hand also. So when we look at talented and gifted, we look at enrichment, we look at the library media specialist program, and then we add in our tech integrationists, whom this district has invested in over the years and added to. We look at and we envision an amazing team of people that can take a look and work together, we, administration and teachers and our media assistants or paraprofessionals working and say, we have a staffing model that we can work with. We have a team. Let's see what we can do to reorganize this, reset standards, reestablish roles and responsibilities. Make sure that we have our non-negotiables of what we don't want to miss. And then present out to the Board of Education in April or May. Be held accountable from the board's perspective to say, we recommended this model and we've worked together as a team, and here's the pros and here's the cons, but we think it's going to do fairly well. Doesn't mean it's perfect, folks. Doesn't mean we couldn't do the same thing keeping the 1.6 library media specialists. We certainly could. But we have to recommend to the board for their consideration as creative programming and as creative recommendations as possible to ensure that we are mindful of the taxpayer dollars while thinking about the school district. This is where we are. I am proud of the work that has happened to date, but the conversation is not going to end tonight. It's going to continue. And it's going to be challenging. But as you all know from how I communicate out to the public, I'm an optimist at heart. Things are going to go well. We're going to be able to navigate this, and we're going to come out with a very strong budget that's going to continue the great tradition of the Ellington Public Schools of providing an outstanding education at or in a highly cost-efficient manner. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to Mr. Greenleaf. He's going to share with you the memo that we sent out to the board today that kind of outlines a lot of the numbers and makes some of the points there. The last thing I'll say before I hand it over, and I neglected to say this, and it is important. One thing that we are very proud of with COVID, because it was brought up. It's been tough. People have been doing a lot of different things. Most districts, many that we know, had their art teachers, their PE teachers, their music teachers reallocated to do intervention work in their districts and cutting essentially most of what they focus on in their jobs. And I will give Brian Hendrickson a great deal of credit for figuring out a way, albeit very hard, to keep our art teachers teaching art, our music teachers teaching music, and our PE teachers teaching physical education. A rarity in the COVID era in Connecticut. So thank you for letting me add that in. I forgot to mention it. Mr. Greenleaf, if you could share your screen and walk the audience through everything. Thank you.
Sure, happy to. So, Scott, I think gave you a really good insight into a lot of the thinking of the board, a lot of, I'll call it color commentary. I'll go through a little bit quicker with maybe a play-by-play of the numbers. I am the numbers guy after all. So you did get this memo earlier this afternoon. Some of this you've seen before, some of this you haven't. So as you recall, last Tuesday, the Finance Committee proposal, which included the reduction of the library media specialist, talented and gifted, and our teacher, and then adding 0.5 FTE to a current 0.5 position to accomplish a talented and gifted portion. That proposal reduced the budget by $184,000. Which would have brought it down to 2.92%. Again, nothing's been acted on at this point. It's just a proposal. Following that meeting, we've continued to do our work as we do every year, looking at our operational accounts, seeing where adjustments can be made. As Scott alluded to, we did get that additional confirmed retirement, which does save us just under $30,000 there. We also were able to better analyze our health insurance proposals that came in. And based on where we are right now, the administration's recommending basically what is a 1% reduction to the premiums increase, taking it from 9% to 8%. I can certainly explain more on that later. I did go back and look at the transportation accounts, and based on kind of where we are current trend for overage times, which is the hours that we pay for over 4 hours per bus in any given month. That bill can be as much as $16,000-$17,000 right now. But based on what we had in the budget versus where we are, we think we can trim a modest $20,000 from those two accounts. And then again, as Scott mentioned, putting back with that additional confirmed retirement, putting back the additional art teacher to provide that flexibility for scheduling. And to provide potential opportunities with alignment to provide enrichment opportunities as previously discussed. So with that, the net there would be just under $63,000 additional to the 184, bringing the total to 247 and a new budget increase of 2.77%. And so with that, I will open the floor to any questions on that.
Actually, Brian, I would like to hear from Mr. Henriksen if he wanted to add anything about the supplemental elementary art staffing memo, and then I will open the floor up for additional questions and comments, and I have some additional things that I'd like to share as well. So, Mr. Henriksen.
Sure, and good to see everyone, and just want to echo Scott's words and thank our staff that you heard from, our art, very talented elementary art department, Steve, Amber, Amy. You heard from them, so I just want to recognize all of their efforts during very challenging times, and just want to let them know how much we appreciate their work. And the arts is very important, and we're very excited. One of the conversations I had was telling them that we're recommending the art position be included, and that just feel passionate about the arts on a personal level. It is important that, as you heard from our staff, that many of our students, that's what keeps them connected to school. It's important to do everything we can to nurture our art program. Absolutely. The memo that was shared with you does, you'll see the date, on the memo, February 2nd, and in the second paragraph just points out that if the position, we don't have to eliminate it, that we would be using that, as Brian states in his memo, to have for scheduling flexibility, help out with the enrichment, talented and gifted programming. So I'm very happy that is the case, and that's what we're talking about. But the purpose of the memo to the superintendent is to outline, and I believe Amy walked through previous years' art programming, is how that is possible to maintain art access for every student at the elementary level, to have art 1 day per week with 2 full-time staff at the elementary level. A key component of that, and there's some notes in the memo, but one of the things is not mentioned, but just on an efficient scheduling standpoint, is we really have to be careful with having staff that is split between buildings during the school day. So when you do have that, you do have travel time, and that could take away from instructional minutes. So we'd be able to have, we know we could do this, on paper, and there's a lot of nuance with it, but have our staff more efficiently scheduled in the building, so they're there during set days and are shifting between buildings. As an aside, one of the things we did last year with our PE department was with health, and we were able to have some more efficient staffing by changing our health model a little bit, and having staff dedicated at the schools for full days, and reduce some of that itinerant travel time during the school day. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the purpose of the memo, just to outline how it was possible. And I'm very happy that we're here recommending that point four art position be included and maintained in the budget going forward.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Henriksen. And Mr. Greenleaf, thank you for going back through the budget and providing additional items for the board to consider tonight. Again, I think Mr. Henriksen phrased it perfectly in regards to the art teacher. It would be to maintain it in the budget because it's currently in there. There's no putting it back in, because right now it is already included in the superintendent's budget. So just a point of order for process for the board to consider. I have lots of questions, as you might have imagined, regarding the budget and potential areas for the board to consider making adjustments. My hope and expectation tonight is the board will take some action through motions made. And I fully welcome and encourage board members. We are only as strong as we are as a whole. And so, I'm open and hopeful that and expect us to take some action tonight, especially on some of the items that Mr. Greenleaf has put forward that appear to have no impact on teaching and learning, and are essentially areas where additional savings can be achieved, or will be achieved, or have been achieved through efficiencies that the superintendent and the business manager have put in place. So if it's okay with the board, I'm going to start the conversation with some of the items that Mr. Greenleaf had put on there. The additional confirmed retirement, Brian, if I may, just again a clarification on that $28,804. I want to be certain I understand where that savings is coming in, and if I understand it correctly, if we look at our personnel account from a budgeting standpoint, you budget at a certain level where the person currently is. Refilling that position at a little bit lower level, that creates a delta, and you're projecting that to be $28,804. So we're not eliminating a position through attrition. We're simply saying the person retiring was going out at a much higher step, maybe top step in that lane, and we're hiring back, at a different lane, and that's what's creating the savings. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We budget for a step 5 within the master's lane. Now, certainly as we go through the hiring process, sometimes we have a first-year teacher that applies for that position, and they come in at step 1. Other times, it's a top step teacher moving from another district, and we hire theirs. But as a budget line item number, we do hold a step 5 in the master's lane.
Good. Thank you, Brian. And I appreciate you stating MA5 is what we use for budgeting. MA5, MA6 for the board's edification is an industry best practice standard in the school business world. And that's exactly what Brian is following for budgeting planning purposes. So thank you. So I think that's a safe one to make an adjustment on. And if there's any board members that would like to make a motion, I cannot as chair, but I'm hopeful that a board member will make a motion on that, at least for further discussion, or we can have more discussion, but certainly looking for a motion to make that adjustment.
Mike, I'd like to, if I may, through the chair, make a motion that we reduce the additional confirmed retirement in the amount of $28,804 from the budget.
I second it.
Seconded by Miriam. Any
Marcia.
discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Who seconded it?
Marcia.
Marcia.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I heard the sound and Miriam moved, and I made an incorrect assumption there. Seconded by Marcia. Any discussion? If I may, again, just to clarify, Brian, are you looking specifically for us to include object or code in our motions, or you're comfortable taking action on the? Okay.
Yes, this particular one is in the middle school account, but you guys don't have to worry about all that technical mumbo jumbo in your motions.
Okay. Just want to make sure you're taking it from the right account, Mr. Greenlee. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion is approved. Mr. Greenleaf, on the health insurance, you went down 1% at a proposed savings to the board's budget of $50,027. As a point of clarification for the board to take this under consideration, that would bring us from the 9% budgeted increase over the current year expenditure now to 8%. Is that correct?
9% premiums increase over the current year. I believe the total account is up something like 7%. But this will bring it down by $50,000.
So what line item? Again, that's why I was looking at object.
So it is the.
Are we going 9 to 8 or 7 to 6? Can you just put that in perspective for us, please?
Yeah. Again, so when I say that we're currently holding a 9% increase, that is in the premiums rate. So if you're talking about $100 worth of premium, the next year it would be $109 that we'd be holding. This would reduce it to 108, so reducing that premium percentage. Now, there's also contractual agreements which typically favor the board each year in a reduction of the employer share in favor of the employees paying a little bit more. And so those are that's factored in as well as changes just in the overall composition of who's taking what level of insurance. But when I say move it -1%, I'm talking about strictly the premiums increase that we factor in. That will 1% premium reduction, bringing it from that again 109 versus to 108 on $100, makes it a $50,000 reduction overall on our $5 million, close to $5 million account.
Okay, thank you. And I want to commend you, Mr. Greenlee, for all the work you're doing in the health insurance. That in and of itself could be a full-time job, putting our book of business out for a fully insured book of business while simultaneously at the board's direction, exploring a self-insured model to save us even more money, like we discussed last night at the Board of Finance, could 7 to 10% over time. That being said, Mr. Greenlee, I'm going to push you a little bit from a risk accounting perspective. I firmly believe with you at the helm, no pressure, sir, and with the aggressive approach that you're taking to negotiating our health insurance account with the superintendent, our brokers, and holding them accountable for every penny we pay them to do their job, and having the work that you're doing behind the scenes with the medical reserve account in the town, and I mean, just some amazing stuff. I feel very confident in sharing my opinion with the board, hopefully for action tonight, of reducing that even further. I'm confident that number is only going to go down over time. I'd like the board to strongly consider, with all those factors in mind, an additional reduction of 2% more on that line item. And again, that's something I can't make a motion on, but I would put it out for the board for further discussion or potential action.
Mr. Picaro, I would like to move to make that motion that we reduce the health insurance premium by 3% versus the 1%. I don't have the exact total here in front of me. If you give me a moment, I could give you that.
Brian, do you have that?
Yeah, it'd be 50.
It's 150,081. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Second.
Miriam, was that you?
No.
Oh.
It was me.
It was Liz.
It was Liz? Okay. Liz, thank you. Discussion. Any discussion? Looks like Dr. Young might have something to say, sir. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, Mike, since you're the expert on this, does that limit our wiggle room when we get additional feedback from the town's finance committee? Are you your strategy is to make our proposal to the town as lean as possible? Is that it?
Thank you, Dr. Young, for the question, and I appreciate you asking it. So if there's any thought about why I'm suggesting it, has not so much to do with making it lean for the town. It's just from experience as to where this number should end up at the end of the day and how much risk tolerance we have now versus later. I think it's an area where we can take a little bit additional risk. No, God bless you, Dr. Young. Interesting to watch somebody sneeze but not hear it. Still deserves a God bless you. I think we can take this risk again, knowing Brian and the work he's doing, Mike, knowing that there's a lot of negotiations happening behind the scenes without showing too many of our cards up front in a public forum. Knowing our brokers who do outstanding work, looking at our trends from years past, looking at our medical loss ratios, looking at our experiences, looking at the number of covered lives that we're projecting for the upcoming fiscal year, and knowing that we are now building a capacity to go self-insured sooner than later. Again, I feel very confident that one way or the other, we will not only meet that 2%, additional 2%, but I actually think Mr. Greenleaf and Dr. Nickel will actually exceed it. And that part can be addressed down the road. So I'm asking.
That makes sense. The self-insured option is the backup to achieving that through our brokers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Additional discussion?
Could you give me the number that it will be, Brian, again?
Yeah, that would equate to 150,000, I think 81.
Okay.
No.
Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Any other discussion, please? Any discussion? I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you. All right. Well, Brian, we're on a roll with you. The last one that you had proposed is the transportation. Can you give a little bit more information about the 20,000? I know you talked more about the differences in the billing and so forth, but I want to hear a little bit more about what we discussed at the last budget meeting, ridership, what we project with students actually utilizing our buses, coming back to school full-time after COVID or still in the midst of COVID. I know there's a lot of factors here, and legally we are obligated to provide every single student that wants bus transportation with it. So I know we got to be careful in making adjustments, but I think there might be a little bit more room there. Also, from a compliance standpoint, the contract allows us to hold the bus company accountable for making sure the radios work, the cameras work, things are done by protocol contractually, and if not, we can actually make reductions to their bill. So all those factors considering, for us to consider, can you give us a little bit more perspective on the 20, and maybe can we push that a little bit, Brian?
Yeah, so the 20, as I said previously, was tied to the hours over 4, which we get billed for. So if a bus runs over 4 hours a day, we get billed at a rate, off the top of my head, close to $60 an hour. Those sums add up over the course of time. to equate to about $160,000 to $180,000. This would kind of trim that portion of the budget back a little bit. And so that's where, that's an estimate each year. We don't know how many actual over hours there are going to be. To your point about ridership, and I think I know where you're going on that with a potential bus reduction. I think it's yet to be seen what ridership will look like in the coming year. We are planning for a more normal year than we had this year. Whether people choose to continue bringing their kids to school or not, I think is yet to be seen. The board did cut a bus last year, which we kept within the budget or kept within the operating because we were continuing to, we wanted to make sure that spacing during COVID times was still fine. So we kept that bus within this year. So, reducing another bus could be a potential challenge. Of course, there's no direct impact on child education, but two things to consider are you do have a board policy that states no bus ride can be over an hour. And so eliminating a bus does push up, it will just push up the other routes that are absorbing those new riders. It will push them closer to that hour time frame and potentially be out of, we'll do our best, but we would, be pushing up against the board policy. The other thing there is that, it will affect families. I would expect that when a bus is eliminated that's been established for 20 plus years within a neighborhood, that you will see parents, or I will see parents, kind of questioning that. And that's certainly my job, and I'm happy to do that if the board thinks that that's appropriate. But there's no implications to cutting a bus.
Thank you, Mr. Greenleaf. Other than the ridership, which is yet to be determined from a data-driven decision-making standpoint, because we actually haven't surveyed the parents yet, and we don't know, like you said, and that's why I'm trying to pick your brain to get some projections if there's any data, even if it's anecdotal, that could help drive some of those decisions. But it sounds like we just don't know at this point in time. How about those other areas? And then I'm interested to hear what other board members may think about this line item and other areas where we can save on transportation. What happened with the? I know. Ms. Zen had contacted me about fuel, and that's related to transportation. Maybe that's a separate line item we could tackle. But I know there's some other costs driving transportation as a whole. I want to make sure. I guess I should take a step back. That when you say transportation, you keep the fuel separate, right, Brian? We're not factoring that in as a total line item. That's why I like to see object and org. I just want to be clear on that. Right?
Yes, fuel line is a separate account within our structure. That is flat year over year, and actually we reduced it by $10,000 last year. And so, I'm confident that we can hit that number right now. Fuel has gone up by about 20% in the last month. We continue to look at the market and kind of see whether it's not better to buy up front or whether to let it ride on the retail price. Not the retail price, but the wholesale price that we get through our contracts. And so we kind of look at that each year and decide which way is the best way to go. Since there's been deflationary pressures on oil over time, the market rate has probably yielded us a better performance over the last few years. I would look at that more harshly, more closely as we look at kind of right now some inflationary pressures on oil right now.
Any other areas in transportation, Brian, that you would be willing to consider the board taking action on that we could talk about?
We did look pretty hard at our special ed transportation. That's a line item that did go up pretty significantly this year. We're in a deficit for that account in the current fiscal year, partially because of COVID, but also just because of student need. I've projected that budget line item to be less than what we're going to spend this year, but more than the budget that we have. currently this year. So, unfortunately, just those specialized interest needs, I wouldn't feel comfortable cutting any more back out of that at this point in time.
Okay. Other board members on this line item?
Mike, if I could, through the chair, the transportation repairs, that is for the buses, Brian? Am I to understand, is that what those repairs are for, or is that for vehicles that we currently have in our own fleet?
That's for our fleet of vans. We run, I think we have about 10 or so vans, including a couple wheelchair vans that we regularly maintain and service. And, occasionally something more significant is needed, but that's what those are for.
Okay, and thank you. The other question, the gasoline question I had was, I'm looking at the line item for transportation, gasoline regular, and in 2018-19, we spent roughly $121,000. And we have it in the adopted budget for 2021 at $139,500. And although you want to stay flat with that, that's an $18,000 increase in a, if you will, regular year versus COVID. So I'm wondering what that increase is because you're concerned about gas prices inflating?
Yeah, so 2018-19, we ended up doing a little bit better on gas prices than was originally budgeted for. That differential between 140 and 121, is a little bit under 20% there. I think you could easily see gas prices move, up 20% from that time period, and usage has stayed about the same. So that's kind of where that is.
Okay, that's the clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
I know Jen Mullen has a question, but if I may, Jen, while we're still on the fuel question that Ms. Zen had asked, Brian, we haven't set on a price, if I heard you correctly, and we are going through a consortium, correct? We're not doing this on our own, trying to find the right strike price, right? We're participating in a consortium with other school districts to leverage the greatest value.
So right now we've actually kind of collaborated a little bit with the town on, really like what is kind of like what I would call like a wholesale rate. It does fluctuate by the market. It's not a set price throughout the year. And as I've said, over the past few years, I think that's probably helped us out a little bit in keeping the cost down because there's been that deflationary pressure on oil over the last few years. As I said, we look at that kind of constantly at the beginning of the year, and if we think that there's going to be an inflationary pressure on the oil, then we would participate within a consortium or try and look, a little bit broader at a strike price.
Okay, thank you. Jen Mullen, please.
I'm also still looking at Object 510, Brian, which is the transportation, and thinking that $20,000 number can go down a little more. Looking at the travel piece of it as far as activities and athletics, are we expecting to see that number go down any given the current COVID situation, or are we keeping it in the budget in hopes that things will resume back to normal?
So we are keeping it in the budget that things would resume back to normal. That price actually only covers about, I'd call it 40 to 50% of the total cost of athletics. The rest is offset by pay to participate fees that are collected at the student activities level. That's just been a flat, that $30,000 is really just kind of a flat line item that the board subsidizes prior to those pay to participate funds coming in.
You could say the same thing, you think, for the travel for the activities, which I would assume would be field trips and such. You don't anticipate seeing any kind of a decrease in those numbers with the COVID situation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly this year there's been a severe reduction to those. We are planning for those to come back in full next year.
Thank you.
Okay, Jen, thank you. If you can lower your hand. Thank you. Jen, that's a great question. And in fact, right before this call, I was on a call with Department of Public Health, and the governor's office, and they are anticipating a meeting between the governor's office, DPH, and CIAC to have those conversations, but nothing's been decided. But I think that's a great question to ask. So now we know Brian's budgeting strategy for that. So that's good to know. Other questions about transportation? Comments? Motion?
All right, I guess I'm back on. I'd like to move.
Before you do that, Jen, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt through the chair. Mike, are we going to, is your motion going to keep that at 20,000? Or do we think there might be a little more wiggle room for that? I guess that would be a question for anybody.
Well, I think if Jen Zen is making a motion, let's hear the number she puts out, and then we can have a discussion about it. And if we want to move it, then we can always do a friendly amendment to adjust it if the first and second want to do so, if that's okay. Jen, you want to take a stab at a motion?
Absolutely. I'd move that we reduce the transportation. So this is regular and SEP combined by $35,000.
Okay. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
Second by Liz. Did I get that right? Okay, good. Discussion. So Jen Zen went to 35. There we go, Jen Mullen.
No, I love it. That's the number I had.
Was it really? Okay.
It was.
Right.
Thank you, Jen.
While we're in discussion, the discussion phase is any comments from Mr. Greenleaf to consider so he knows where we came up with that, or any comments from Mr. Greenleaf to think about?
No, again, I think it's a reasonable cut. What I'll probably end up doing is taking the extra amount out of the special education programming and hoping that we can bring those costs down from where they're projected at.
Okay. And, we do have reserves if needed, but thank you, Brian. I appreciate your support of the motion. Mike, Dr. Young, your hand was up.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I guess my first question is, just a statement, I guess, is that I do think that parents may remain interested in driving their kids to school, and that has parking lot implications, right, for us, and logistics, as well as savings on buses. So I understand Mr. Greenleaf's having trouble reading the tea leaves on the future prices of oil and the intentions of every parent in Ellington. The other piece, I guess I'm concerned with was when you raised the issue of our staking the athletics travel at roughly 30,000, I think you said, which was roughly 40% of the overall transportation costs. Let's say that it's a shortened season next fall. Do we generally put our 30,000 in and then let the any savings accrue to the rate of the parents, or do we have some kind of adjustment? What would be your general guidelines there? I know you can't be specific at all.
Yeah, so I know what we did this year, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe for football and for cheerleading, because those were reduced pretty significantly in terms of the transportation required for them, that we reduced the pay to participate fee from $100 to $60.
Okay, and our level of commitment stayed at the same level?
Our level stayed at the same level, yeah.
I think that's fine, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Young. Great question. Chris, your hand's up, and then Miriam.
Yes, along the same lines of the athletic travel account, there's also travel there for world language, for theater arts, for music. I'm assuming they're not having those competitions at this point, and who knows whether or not it'll be reinstated for next year. Is that something that we could look at as well?
Yeah, I mean, so what I would say here is we're planning for a more normal year, certainly than this year, and for those to come back in full. Obviously, in this year where we have not had the same level of expenditures, that does not mean that we've, allowed them to, schools or whatever, to purchase supplies, say, with those funds. They're still sitting there, obviously, in case things improve in the spring and there's some costs associated with that. But in the end of the day, we also had a bunch of expenses that we didn't budget for, such as PP&E and other things that are, have to be factored into our end budget at the bottom line, right? So this year we have a total budget of $40,616,036. Our goal is to come in obviously better than that if we can, not over it for the town. And so, the savings that we have on expenditures on those budget line items are going to pay for potentially COVID supplies somewhere else. And we would kind of approach it the same way going into next year. If for some reason we are still in COVID mode, which God forbid we are, and those travel expenses do not come back at the same rate, that does not mean that they will get spent on something else. It may be that there are other COVID costs that we have to associate with, or it will be money that gets returned in balance to the town at the end of the year.
Chris, are you done asking that question before we go to Marion? And if I may, I know we have to stay on topic for the motion on the floor, and but since you brought it up, Brian, and again, I'm going to be very concise in this. I do look forward to having a discussion at some point tonight, or if we do another budget meeting, about our projected revenues, because we know that there will be additional coronavirus relief funding coming in to pay for some of those additional expenses. It's still not exactly clear on how much we're getting, so that is a conversation, to your point, Mr. Greenleaf, that I don't want the board to think that by making a reduction on this line item, it's going to impact our ability to buy PPE, because there's other revenues and other sources that I know you're creatively putting together that we will discuss when we get to I think our projected revenues conversation. But I know it's fluid and you're moving money around to do the best you can. But again, my standard operating procedure is, if we can think through that now, I don't want the taxpayers to pay for it now and then have it returned later, because that could have a potential mill rate impact. So I'd rather spend a little bit more time on this side of the equation before it even becomes a factor for a potential mill rate impact by sending it over to the Board of Finance for consideration. So with that in mind, let's stay on topic, but I appreciate the conversation. Miriam, you're next. I'm sorry, Chris, are you all set? Okay, thank you. Miriam?
My comments on this, I was ahead of you, so I'll just wait in line.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam. Any other comments or questions? Miriam, your hand's still up, but I think you're all set. Okay. Other comments or questions? And Miriam, your hand is still up. Do you have a comment to make? No? Okay. Very good. All right. That being said, we'll call the motion to a vote. There's a proposed motion by Jen Zen for a reduction of $35,000 to regular and special education transportation in the amount, again, of $35,000, seconded by Jen Mullen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes. I have several other line items that I like to talk about, but I just had my three, so I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to other board members if anyone else would like to ask questions or propose motions. Jen Mullen.
I've been crunching numbers since we started, and my math may be a little off, but with the motions that just passed, I'm seeing a savings of $213,885. And when I look at the budget that was originally proposed, we were looking to find a savings of $184,000. That includes, granted, the art teacher and everything else. I would like to reconsider bringing in the gifted and talented, the 1.0 that was originally cut at $67,638.
Okay, Jen, I didn't hear it necessarily in the form of a motion, so I think you kind of threw it out there for maybe discussion.
Maybe just discussion before there's a motion. I guess I kind of wanted.
And I appreciate you doing that because I got to get it clear in my mind as well, because we've had so many back and forth. So Scott or Brian, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the 1.0 FTE talented and gifted that was reduced by the finance committee proposal of 67,638. There was no action taken against that because that was against the superintendent's proposed budget. So as it stands right now, for Jen Mullen, if I understand it, and gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian and Scott, that is still in the budget. There's no need to restore it, correct?
Correct. Yeah. There would not need to be a motion to restore it.
Right. So it's still in Dr. Nichols' proposed budget for the board to consider. It was a finance committee suggestion to reduce it, so we don't have to take action to put it back because it's never been officially removed by the board, correct?
That is correct. And I'll give you the just kind of rundown. Jen was, I think, pretty much spot on with her numbers. It was
Jen is always spot on with her numbers. Both Jens, be careful.
Yeah, it was just over $213,000 that was reduced. That brings the proposed budget down to a percentage increase of 2.85%.
Thank you, Brian, for doing that. Jen Mullen, did you want to continue?
No, I think that's good. I guess I got confused because it was in red. So I thought it had been cut. So I apologize. Thank you everyone for the clarification.
Yeah, no apology necessary, Jen. I'm glad you asked it. Others might have been thinking the same, and I had to get it clear in my head too.
So to clarify, then the media specialists are still not cut.
Correct. That 2.85% would not include any cuts to library media or talented and gifted.
Okay.
Okay, let's stay in order, but I'm glad you asked that, Liz. The next question, Jen, you're all set. Your hand's still up. Kristen?
First, I think it's funny that you guys call me by my full name when we're virtual because that's what it comes up on the screen. But anyway, when I first put my hand up, it was actually before Jen spoke, and I just wanted to reiterate my support for the 1.0 full-time gifted and talented. I know I'm a broken record about this. I've been saying this over and over and over again since this process started. So obviously I would like that to remain in the budget, the 1.0. And then I guess it's a question. So that 0.4 art teacher that wasn't taken out, correct? So that's still in the budget as well. I'm seeing nods. So
that's
because
correct.
I'd like the 0.4 art teacher to remain in as well for all the reasons that were stated prior to the meeting. Mr. Bernard and Mr. Bernard, my kids had him. I adore him. And the other two art teachers, Amy and Amber, who I don't know, but they seem lovely. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Chris. And again, I think just to reiterate, if we take no action on that, it's still it remains in the budget. So there's no action required for us to do anything with that.
So I'm saying let's not take action on those. Let's keep those two in there.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. In the order of the hands being raised, Chris Socha comes up, but I believe that's Carrie Socha's next. Carrie?
It is. I'm sorry, I should sign into my own account, but his is already on the computer. I just want to, I just want to thank the administration for putting the talented and gifted program on this budget. I've been on the board, I don't know, a lot of years now, it feels like. And from day one, this has been something that I've been very passionate about. And so sometimes I say, what am I doing? Is this all paying off? Am I making a difference? And it takes time, but I'm just really happy to have the support of the administration and the board regarding the talented and gifted position. With that said, I really hope that it's a program and not just a teacher thrown at something, that we really are putting together a program behind that and something that's really going to work and be meaningful to the students. I don't want to just throw money and spend money at it just to say we have it, but then it's not impactful. So I'm optimistic and I'm grateful. So thank you for that. The arts, I think it was the right thing to do to put the 0.4 back in. I haven't spoken on this, I don't think previously, but I think the administration did the right thing in bringing that back as well. It is not just about, painting or making a sculpture. It really is about meeting students where they're at with their social, emotional, and making those connections through the arts. So thank you. And thanks for letting me talk, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. And Carrie, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but happy anniversary to you and Chris. And thank you for spending your wedding anniversary tonight with the Board of Education. We appreciate the sacrifice. Miriam, you're next.
My pleasure.
Yes, Mike. I'd just like to clarify, how many media specialists are we having? And I guess my question is the position that Becky Wentworth had at Center School going to be filled?
Scott, Brian?
It would be, if it's in the budget, which it is right now, we would fill the position. Yes.
All right. It is in the budget that we received on that Saturday.
Yes.
And it will be filled so that we will have 2.6 at the elementary school and FTEs and 1 FTE at the middle school and 1 FTE at the high school.
Yes. If all stands status quo right now, yes.
Okay, because I spent a great deal of time looking at all kinds of areas to make cuts. And I think Mike, I would still like, as we go along, to propose some of them. But for me, it is essential. I was amazed at what the library media specialists were doing. And I think they're playing an integral part in our enrichment and gifted and talented program. And I want that to stay.
Thank you, Miriam. And before we turn it over to Liz, I want to make sure you have every opportunity. Did you want to make any proposed adjustments in the form of a motion at this time? Or do you yield to Liz for further comment?
I'll yield to Liz, and after she's through, if we're still doing this, I have a few thoughts.
Thank you. Look forward to hearing them. Liz, you're on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I strongly am against cutting the library media specialists. I'm supportive of the gifted and talented, but not to replace the library media specialists. So I just wanted that out there.
Thank you, Liz. Anyone else would like to comment? I don't see any hands up at this time. While folks are thinking about additional questions or potential motions for consideration, if I may throw out, I have a few more on my list for further discussion, possible action. Dr. Nickel, the board has made a strong and bold commitment to diversifying our workforce. And one concrete way that we've done that is through the support of the residency program that you had shared with us. That comes with a price tag. And again, the concept, the diversifying our workforce, I believe the board is 100% committed to exploring for so many reasons, and we understand the value. But I'm just talking about the financial support of that one particular piece. There has been some recent conversations and discussions that there could be grant funding to support such a wonderful initiative. Can you share or shed some light on that, where possibly we could make a reduction to that line item, because I know that's included in your budget. Again, we support it, but maybe we could offset it through grant funding, or even take a risk and make a slight reduction in take a calculated risk that it'll be supplemented and offset by grant money that we could secure.
Mike, if I may, actually, great minds think alike. Scott, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was looking at doing some research, and there's an organization called newsschools.org, and they fund these type of bold ideas where we're trying to diversify our workforce, and they are offering diversity leadership applications in the amount of $150,000 for the coming year. And they do have applications open through February 22nd. So I think it's something we should take a look at to help possibly fund that teacher, maybe even two.
Thanks, Jen. Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, of course, we can take a look at that. I appreciate that, Jen. If you could send that information over, we'll look into it. In terms of there's a couple, right now, just for clarification, the teacher residency program price tag of $65,000 is not in the operating budget, right? So it's not in that percentage area, right? When you're talking about the percentage increase, it's fully funded right now in a grant, the open choice grant. So that being said, if we're just thinking about what could possibly occur with additional grant funding from the state, right now there's not a bill number that has been submitted for this particular initiative, but a press release is going to be coming out from the RESC Alliance that is looking to expand. The RESC is CREC is part of the RESC, Learn is part of the RESC, Ed Advance is part of the RESC, so EastCon is part of the RESC. That's what we mean by that. They're regional educational centers. It's going to be a press release with about 8 to 10 legislators, including the chairs of the Education Committee. You're probably going to see a bill come out of the committee, which is a different way of introducing a bill. The other thing to be thinking about is the governor's budget is going to be presented a week from today. And we are also hoping, but we can't be sure, of some money allocated in the governor's budget regarding grant funding for programs like this. So I can't give you a guarantee or a percentage or a likelihood that we're going to be able to secure additional funds from the state, but that's what we're working for. And so we can certainly look at the $150,000 grant, right? We can look into that. I appreciate that, Ms. Zen. My suggestion would be, because this is not in the operating budget, but right now in the choice grant budget, right? That any thoughts of reducing that and taking a risk on hopefully getting grant money, especially because we are out and about very visibly lobbying for this legislation to go through, for us not to be able to participate in the program if the grant funding didn't come through, I don't think would be beneficial for Ellington. So my recommendation would be, as this process unfolds a little bit, let's see what happens with the legislative process. Let's see where it's going. And this could be certainly something that we look at a later date in the budget process of possibly reducing it or cutting it and then supplanting it and doing some fungible moves from the operating budget over to the choice grant budget, if that makes any sense. Brian, is that making sense?
Absolutely. And, I would just highlight that the revenue projection for next year in the open choice grant account is just under $600,000. The projected expenditures in that account are closer to $750,000. We're kind of leveraging some of our past good management within this grant and some excess carryover in order to do that. But right now, with that funded in, there is a deficit model in our spending, which we can't sustain over time. And so, we are already taking on a little bit of risk in hoping that those grants come through so that we can offset those costs.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's see. I don't see any hands up. Other comments or questions from the board? Liz.
Can I change the subject, or are we staying on this subject? The
No,
choice.
go wherever you'd like. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to talk to you about Brian Greenleaf, about the $300,000 that's in the budget for the self-funded dental. That is, we usually have a surplus in that at the end of the year. So I hate to see it added, this $300,000 added to the budget.
Yeah, so our projected spend for that next year, based on what would be a reduction in premiums of 12%, so a negative 12% reduction to premiums. Our projected spend on that, and also accounting for the contracts that we have with our employees, our projected spend is $310,000. I've reduced it by $10,000 to account for the excess reserve that we have currently. And so, obviously we're still waiting to set that final reserve number, but it's not like we will not have any spend there. We will have close to $300,000, maybe even a little bit more in total expenditures next year, even with a 12% reduction in premium rates.
So can we use any of the surplus toward that $300?
I would say technically yes, but that does create a one-time reduction to the account, which then has to be made up in future years. And so while it's technically possible, it would not be my recommendation for kind of long-term management. As I've kind of alluded to, I think with the Finance Committee, my goal would be to move what I would consider excess reserve. So that's, money in excess of what is a reasonable threshold limit for dental, which is probably closer to right now $100,000 versus the 200,000 or so that we have in the account. My recommendation would be to move that $100,000 that's what I consider excess reserve over to the medical reserve account in order to establish the reserve there in a much more volatile account were we to go self-insured.
But in a pinch, we would be able to utilize some of that.
Absolutely, but I would save that pinch for when I don't come in at the 6% premium increase.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And before we go to Carrie, just to follow up on Liz's train of thought there, Brian, just so I'm clear, the $223,000 that has been proposed for the Board of Finance to consider moving into the medical reserve account or the self-insurance fund, is that inclusive of the savings that you're talking? Okay, I'm seeing a no.
No, that is separate. There's kind of two distinct things, right? So we have the excess money that we returned to the town to the unassigned fund balance from fiscal 20 last year. That $223,000, we've asked the board to move that from the unassigned fund balance into the medical reserve account. We're also working with the town. Obviously, that dental reserve was set aside for dental insurance. And so it's not just easy to access that money. But the goal there is to come up with a process to move that into the medical reserve account. Because really the broader intent there is to maintain reserves within benefits for our employees.
And if I may, just again, one more follow-up to Liz, who now has her hand up again as well. But the experience on the dental, does it support taking a little bit more of a risk to make an additional reduction to Liz's point on that, Brian, all things considered?
I feel that with the reduction of the reserve through the process that I talked about and the 12% plus $10,000 cut, that we will be more in line with our experience in that arena.
Okay. Liz, did you have further questions on this line item? Okay, let me go to Carrie first and then we can come back. Carrie, you're next.
I just didn't want to jump around topics. If Liz is still on that topic, I'll yield the floor to her and come back.
She's all set. Go ahead.
Okay. Can I just have a clarification? How much was budgeted for the student teaching initiative program
Yeah, again, it's $65,000. That's within the choice account. So it's not funded within the Board of Ed funds. And as I mentioned earlier, we're taking a little bit of a risk there because we're spending significantly more than we're projected to bring in at level funding of that grant. And so, and that's based on some reserves that we were able to put aside through good management in past years. But ultimately we're in a deficit model of spending in that choice account right now, and it needs to be certainly sustained or grow if we want to keep those programs going, or we need extra grants, like as Scott and Jen and Mike alluded to.
If we reduce the budget by the 65,000 in hopes of getting the grant money, which I think is pretty possible, given what Ms. Zenas just said, and also from what I'm hearing up at the legislature, to be able to fund that and get grant money for that. Do you think that would be too aggressive on our part?
My worry there is that we would be moving what money from the general fund currently into the choice account. And when we do that, and we're in the deficit model of spending, should we, not increase that grant in the future, or should that spending stay the same? It would be a potential issue for us. The reason I'm less concerned about the resident teacher is that it is an important program. It is something that the board has put forward as a kind of legislative priority. But in terms of strict impact to the district, it is important. But if it was, let's say we weren't able to fund it 2 or 3 years down the road, I think that's probably a little bit easier risk to take on than if we were to say move a art teacher into the account, which is where, quite frankly, our .4 art teacher and our .6 library media specialists are. And if we get to the point 2 years down the road where we don't have enough funding for those positions, that will be again a big issue.
Carrie, I can just add to that, and it's a great question what you're saying. I see the line of thinking. What's always tricky with these grant accounts, especially the choice, where you have a lot of flexibility of how you spend the money, which is it's really a positive that you have the flexibility of spending it out whatever you want. Is that over time, if you put in a too high a percentage of positions, it's really a move that districts do on a regular basis. They just, to get their budget lower, they keep shifting positions over, and making assumptions. Some of the assumptions play out, some of them don't. But what ends up happening is it's a deficit spending model. And as the contracts increase up and the funding in the choice stays flat, you start to lose a great deal of flexibility. And before you know it, you get into a bind 2, 3, 4 years down the road where you've kind of used up your money, and you're going to start to eliminate positions that are solid and are great programming positions. And we want to guard against that. So we're conservative as to how we kind of like handle that. And we try to keep a little bit of a cushion there for different emergencies and things, and guarding against like that deficit funding spending model. And so it's a tricky balance. It also lends to the benefit of the choice program and that funding for all the programming that goes on in the school district, of maintaining or increasing it within reason, because it benefits so many kids. So it's a tough one. It would be an aggressive move, Carrie. Even though it's a great line of thinking, it'd be aggressive at this point in time.
Anything else, Carrie?
I guess I'd like to see if there's anyone else on the board that thinks that what other people are thinking, or that if anyone else would support a motion to lower the budget and hope for the best on the grant money coming in for that position.
I get a point of, point of order clarification. That 67,000 is not in our operating budget, correct?
Correct.
Oh, wait,
So
I guess I'm a little confused.
it's not in the operating budget. And so what I was trying to allude to there is, in order to reduce the operating budget, we would have to shift something from the operating budget into the choice account. And because we're already in a deficit model where we're projecting to spend $750,000 on $600,000 worth of revenue, that has a very short time period in order to do that. I would recommend, if we were going to do that, I would recommend finding a one-time expenditure in order to move into that account. However, we don't really have any one-time expenditures really within the operating budget. And so, you would end up basically next year or the following year, either having to move that position back into the general fund budget, which is going to inflate that budget increase at that point in time, or we're going to have to cut that position.
Carrie, it's Mike, and I see the other hands up as well, but I want to make sure Carrie understands this fully. So I like the way you're thinking, Carrie, and trying to creatively connect the dots. And I would be pushing hard for it as well until I heard Brian Greenleaf said that we're deficit funding the open choice account right now. If there was money to play there, I would be looking at doing exactly what Brian suggested and looking for the board support to maneuver some of the money there to offset one-time expenditures without supplanting the operating budget per se. But there's quite a bit of discretion allowed in the open choice funding for us to offset operational costs. And there's a way to achieve exactly what you said, Carrie, by doing some of that maneuvering. The problem is, bottom line, is I heard Mr. Greenleaf say we're deficit funded in the open choice account. So I put a pause on that in my mind in hopes that maybe the grant can come through, and that could be a multi-year grant. So I at this point, my opinion, just to help you think it through for your consideration and others, I agree with what Dr. Nichols said. I think that's something we should keep on the radar screen as a potential for reduction, and make some of those moves once we get more information about the grant potential to do some of that offsetting.
Okay, it just sounded to me like we're just switching we're just switching where the money is going. And it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. If we're operating, why are we operating in a negative with the choice? We're spending too much money out of the choice fund. I don't understand necessarily why it's in the choice fund, but it seems like we're just moving one pile to another pile, robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's how it sounds to me, but I respect what everybody's saying and will follow your advice.
No, I think you've described it in an accurate way. I do want to hear from Mr. Greenleaf at some point when we get to the revenue discussion as to what the parameters are for the deficit in that account and how we've been handling it. That is obviously something the board needs to be aware of, but we can certainly get to that when we get to the revenue conversation. And so with that, if I may, Jen's next, and then Liz is next after that. Jen Zen?
Okay, yes, thank you, sorry. Can I switch subjects? Is that okay to move on to different?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anything's fair game at this point.
Brian, for the overtime for the custodians, would any of that have anything to do with COVID, with the overtime being as high as it is?
No, we had, I believe that was actually an account we cut last year as well. But I don't have a good sense of where it is current year. It's probably a little bit over projected. But it wouldn't be an account that I would recommend touching again, seeing how we touched it going into this current year.
Okay, I'm just wondering if with future funding, there might be some leverage there to, if some of that overtime is based on COVID, if we're going to see more money from the state, if that would assist us in some way there.
Yeah, it's a good question. And Mike's alluded to this as well. The way that we've been treating additional revenues that are coming in, especially the potential for FEMA revenues, is those are really going to be town side revenues to help better the financial position of the town as a whole, not necessarily reduce any costs operating wise to the Board of Ed. And so it's still something that we're going to have to account for, but hopefully it'll be money that we receive back from FEMA and go to the town. If we're talking about kind of direct applications to the town, such as what's called the ESSER and the ESSER2 grant, those are things that are going to offset direct costs to the district, and again, probably reduce our operating expenditures in the current fiscal year, as opposed to have a better, have an impact for the fiscal 22 year.
Understood. Okay, thank you. The other thing is I'm looking for clarification on and I was at this committee meeting too, but the financial committee's proposal regarding the library media specialist, the talented and gifted, and the current position in the art teacher. Can we go through those numbers? So like right now, we still have the 1.6 FTE library media specialist. We still have the talented and gifted in there. We still have the art teacher. What's the 0.5 talented and gifted in current position?
So I can explain that. So the intent there was if we reduced the 1.0 FTE talented and gifted teacher, that we would do two things within an existing position, which is a full 1.0 position tech integrationist at the high school. We would shift that down to the elementary level, and it would be split between tech integration and enrichment. Again, this was pending the cut of the 1.0 gifted and talented teacher. The other thing that we were going to do is add to an existing 0.5 FTE teacher another 0.5 that would be focused on talented and gifted. And so you would kind of get a portion of that 1.0 talented and gifted through the 0.5 addition, which is that $44,000 add, and the budget neutral move of the tech integration is from the high school down to the elementary level.
I'm sorry, Brian. Are you referring to the library media specialist or a current gifted and talented? I didn't think we had a current gifted and talented teacher.
It is proposed in the budget. So as it stands right now, just to recap for everybody, we are at 2.85%. Those are motions that have been acted on by the board. Currently within that 2.85%, you have 2.6 library and media specialists at the elementary level and a proposed 1.0 FTE talented and gifted. What I believe Jen was talking about is if the proposal that was given to the finance committee included reducing the library media specialists by 1.6 FTEs in total and reducing the talented and gifted by 1.0, and then adding back a 0.5 in a different way to accomplish a budget cut, close to $130,000. There was also the 0.4 art teacher in there that brought it up to $184,000. So none of that's been acted on. If you were to act on it, obviously there would be a reduction below the 2.85% budget.
But correct me if I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. Is the administration supporting that proposal at this time?
Yeah, so Dr. Young, I think that when we talk about the different roles in the Balancing Act, right, we want the board, and this is, it's the superintendent's proposed budget, and we're going through a process here, and the board is eventually going to adopt a budget, right? So the board has to collectively, tonight and in subsequent meetings, if they have them, feel comfortable with what percentage increase they want to adopt, right? And so that is something that you all have to determine. It's not something that you've communicated to me in terms of what numbers. We know the general numbers of where we want to be. The administration is, if we had our preference, we wouldn't cut any positions. We'd keep them all in, and we probably would add some. We would love to be able to have more positions to do all the work and be really robust in these areas, right? But we know that if we're going to find a significant amount of money to lower the budget and keep moving it down, if that's where the board wants to be, this particular model, we think we can do a lot of work with how we proposed it and really come out with a great program, pros and cons, and some pluses and some minuses, however it shakes out, right? Which is what we're going to do with the teachers and create the team. So that's our recommendation, to continue to, if we're looking at positions, if we're looking at creative programming to lower the budget, that's there for your consideration. So we support the recommendations. It's just going to be a question of what numbers you want to get to.
And Dr. Young, if I may, just again, I respectfully wanted to give you a chance to interject while it's relevant, but Jen Zen still has the floor. Jen, did you want to continue?
Well, basically thank you, Mike. What I wanted to say was, so that 44,859, that 0.5 talented and gifted, would that go back in? So would that be another part? So I'm trying to understand. So that's a positive versus the negatives you have in there.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, that was contingent upon kind of a broader proposal with reducing the talented and gifted teacher that's been proposed, as well as looking at the library media specialist and enrichment model that's going on. I think, as Dr. Nichols said, and again, if you don't act at all, that 0.5 position does not get added to the budget. It just stays at 2.85%. However, if you are going to, say, make a proposal to eliminate the talented and gifted 1.0 teacher, it would be our recommendation to do it with combination, the add back there of the 0.5. You could also propose just to eliminate the gifted and talented teacher altogether. These are all valid ways to approach it.
Any more questions, Jen?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Miriam, Kristen, Liz, and then I want to get back to Dr. Young for any additional comments, because I want to hear if he has anything else to add. Miriam, you're next.
Yes, Mike, thank you. I've been looking at accounts 330, 530, 610, and 810. And I've got the numbers here from 2018-19 through 2024.
Miriam, can you repeat those one more time? Because I want to look them up as we're going, please. Thank you.
330 professional development, page 45. 580 conference travel general, page 50. 610 supplies, page 54. And 810 dues and fees, page 57 and 58. Would you like me to take each one separately?
Yes, please. Start with the 330. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, 330. Starting in 2018, our actual was $74,356. In 2019, it was $55,097 and change. We don't have an actual for 2021, but budgeted was $94,534. And in 21-22 was $101,104. I was looking for money, and I came up with close to $100,000 by taking 10% out of each of these accounts. So a 10% cut in the 330 account would be $10,110, which would bring the total to just under $4,000 from what we budgeted in 2021. I do not believe we spent $94,534 in professional development this year. Did we, Brian?
Obviously, we haven't completed the year, but that number will be significantly depressed because of COVID.
Okay, so I'm suggesting that we take $10,110 out of that account. In the 580 account, conference.
Mary, hold on one second. I just want to make sure that because I love the way you're thinking. Do you want to make that in the form of a motion for action?
Well, do you want me to do each one in the form of a motion, or do you want me to do all four of them together?
I would suggest doing them separately because I
All
think
right.
they're separate cost centers that may have different consequences for discussion. So I'll leave it up to you, but that's what I would suggest.
Okay, well, I move that we cut the 330 account by 10% or $10,110.
Okay, is there a second? Somebody like to
I'll
second?
second it.
Second.
Seconded by Liz. Any discussion? Go ahead, Miriam. Did you want to continue or anyone else, please?
I have a question on this part.
Hold
Brian,
on.
you were-
Hey, Jen, let's, I think Scott first, if you don't mind, and then we'll go to Jen for comment. Thank you.
Yes, if it pleases the board before you vote on the motion, it may be wise to ask Mr. Hendrickson, who runs the professional development account, as to what the impact on programming will be and teacher. This is monies that go to teachers for the most part for their professional learning.
Absolutely. We want to hear from everybody, and that's why we do discussion before we take a vote. So I believe Jen Mullen is next for commenting on the motion on the floor that's been first and seconded.
Thank you. Just a question, Brian. You were saying that there would be a surplus this year in the professional development stuff. Does that stay in that object number and carry over from year to year? Or do we just wipe clean and we're good? So the surplus this year, where does that money go?
Back to the town or to cover, over expenditures elsewhere in this year. But, really, again, we manage to that 46,16036. If we're at 45,16036, that's $100,000 that would be returned to the town. If we're 47,160, that's $100,000 that we would need additional appropriations on. So all of that gets reset at the end of each year and it returns to the town because we are ultimately an entity of theirs.
Jen, all set? Jen Mullen?
Yeah, and my next thing was to ask Brian Hendrickson about the professional development days. So Scott, you were 10 steps ahead of me.
All right, and we will get to Mr. Hendrickson. Let's keep going with the board comments on the motions on the motion on the floor. And again, I know there's a lot of hands raised here. I'm going to take the hands raised in order, but I know other people were waiting to talk about other items as well. So, Miriam, okay, Jen Mullen, you talk. Dr. Young, you're next.
Thank you. I'm waiting to hear from Mr. Hendrickson on the issue of professional development, but I'll just take my moment, thank you, to say that there's been a lot of talk, Mike, of class sizes and trying to reduce, trying to make it more efficient and improve our quality of services to students ultimately. Certainly, professional development is a much better way to improve student quality of services to students than the expense of reducing class sizes. So I would be pretty strong. I would need a very strong argument to support a reduction in professional development, especially as we return to normal or something like normal. I do believe there'll be quite a bit of PD associated with how to take the best of what we've learned from remote learning and feed that forward into the new normal. So I really don't think that's a place to look for savings compared to some of the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Jen Zen, and then Mr. Hendrickson. Jen Zen.
Thanks, Mike. I would agree with Dr. Young. I would not like to see any reduction in the PD area. One of the major drivers for us during COVID has been the half-day Wednesday, which gives the teachers the opportunity to get together to talk about successes, failures, what works, what's going well. And I think that that's all part of that professional development. And I agree with Dr. Young as well that it is shown that the teachers in the studies that we've seen that teachers that are getting better professional development can handle the class sizes in the range of 22. So I would agree that we should not reduce that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Zen and Mr. Henriksen, please.
Sure. So the impact, if the question is what is the impact of that, it would be significant when considering the overall percentage of the professional development line is well under 1%, well under 1%, not even getting close to that of the total school district budget. And those funds are greatly appreciated by teachers to attend conferences. And then a good chunk of that is the professional development that we offer to our teachers over the summer that are all targeted and prioritized. And that's work we've been very transparent with the past couple of years and bring that to the curriculum committee. And we get very strong feedback from our staff that is oftentimes a highlight of their year working with their colleagues and doing that professional development. And as Dr. Young said and Jen Zen said about coming out of COVID and all of the learning and even all of the work from Wednesdays, looking to really have that stick, that's a major investment. And for the relative return on investment on that of the whole budget book, that's one of the highest return on investment budget lines relative to our total spend in the budget.
Well, thank you, Mr. Henriksen. And I'm going to turn it back to Miriam, and then I know Liz has her hand raised. But if I may, and Miriam, I want you to help me understand. I appreciate your analysis, Miriam, because if I heard you correctly, you weren't talking about the merits of the program or professional development. You were looking at it through a financial lens, from a utilization standpoint, and making a logical deduction to say, if it's projected that we're not going to be doing as much professional development, therefore there may not be as much cost. So if I misunderstood you, please let me know, because that's the way I took it, and that's I'm looking for more information maybe from.
I think you're correct. You're correct, Mike. I looked at the 1920 school year, and then I looked at the 21-22 school year. In 2019 and 2020, we expended $55,000, and we're asking this year for $101,000, which is more than a 40% increase. I particularly picked these 4 areas that I'm talking about because of the percentage increase over a 2-year period. I certainly understand professional development and the importance of professional development. But I was looking at the fact of going from $55,097.52 actual 2 years ago in 1920, a year prior to this year, to $101,104. And I felt that I needed to bring these 4 areas up because of the percentage increase that we were doing, and asking if we could cut just a small amount of that percentage increase to save. Originally, I was looking to save the position of the art teacher and the media specialist, but now I'm saying I'm bringing this forward because it's almost $100,000, and I'm asking the board to consider, can we take less than a 45% increase over 2 years and live with that in order to cut the amount of money we're asking from our taxpayers?
Well, thank you, Miriam, very much. So we have additional comments from board members. Dr. Young, you're next, sir.
No, I got you. It's almost doubled on the final line of that 330 account, from 55,000 to 100,000. So I see your point. And
I was stuck on.
Miriam, hold on. Let Dr. Young finish. Thank you.
No, I'll cede the balance of my time to Miriam. I see what she's saying. I'd like to hear from both Brian's the justification for that fairly large increase.
Oh, Mike, I was stuck on the last 2 columns until I went back and looked at 2019. And it was then I was looking at the difference between last year and this year. When I went back to 2019 and I saw these numbers, and for this one, I don't have the percentage. For the others, I have the percentage that it's gone up. I felt it reasonable to ask those questions.
I think it's very reasonable to ask those questions, Mary, and I'm glad you have. Let's continue this discussion. Thank you, Dr. Young. Liz, you're next.
Yeah, I'm wondering, where are the conferences, I mean, the professional development, where does that take place? Are the teachers traveling? Because there's a big jump in the travel for professional development and teacher conferences. And I'm wondering, are we doing most of them in-house now and bringing people in, or are the teachers doing it themselves? Because there's a big jump in the travel also for teachers.
Okay. Well, and again, we're only discussing the motion on the floor, but I see how you're connecting the dots. Brian Henriksen or Greenleaf or Dr. Nickel?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll jump in quickly here. I think Miriam's absolutely right to look at the left two columns in our expenditures and where we've been versus relative to the current budget that's been proposed. I would like to provide a little bit of additional context to both those years just to help the board make their decision a little bit more. So in 1920, those expenditures can be very misleading just because we didn't spend the last third of the year in school. And so there was a significant reduction along the professional development line last year in that last third of the year of things that did not occur within the schools as we kind of shifted to virtual learning and just trying to get that set up. If you look at the year before, that's also a little bit misleading as well, because we did have a Teachers College, which is a program that's run at our elementary schools. Those funds are accounted for in the last line item of 330 there, which is the Services Professional Development, EDS, which stands for Educational Services. That's the district-wide account. What we were able to do in that year is shift probably about $20,000 to $30,000 worth of those costs into a grant that we've kind of budgeted for differently this year. And so while it does look like a significant increase from expenditures to budget, I think we're fairly confident with the numbers that we put forward going into next year is to be closer to what you'll ultimately see in the expenditures.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Greenleaf. I believe Liz is next. Nope, Liz is all set. Jen Mullen.
Thank you. Looking at overall from last year to this year, it is an increase of 6570. And I kind of want to just make a statement that I again would be hard pressed to make any cuts here. I do, Miriam, very much appreciate your financial digging into this and everything else, but I think too we need to consider the improvements that Mr. Hendrickson has brought and the team has brought to the professional development days and the enhancements that they've brought to that too. So I think there is a price tag with some meat and some substance to the PD days. And I think that they've become much more substantial to these teachers and very much helpful. So I would, for a 65-70 cut, I would be, or an increase in the budget from last year, I would be hard pressed to remove it from here.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Any additional comments? Okay, Jen Brown, do we have the capability to do a roll call? Because I'm not sure how it's going to play out with yay, nay.
If you want me to go down a list for you, I can.
Yeah, I mean, it might be, if I'm gonna call it to a vote, maybe you can do a roll call.
Sure.
And then that way it'll just be easier because it's probably my hearing and my eyesight that are both going on.
Okay.
All right, so I'm calling it to vote. Go ahead, Jen Brown.
Okay. Miriam,
Yay.
Carrie, Carrie Sosha.
Yes, I'm here. Can you call on me later? I'm still thinking.
Sure.
Call me at the end.
Okay. Marcia,
I see both sides. I abstain.
Liz,
I think I'm going to say yes with this because I think a lot is being done in-house, and I think we might be able to find. I just think it would be we would be able to save that money.
Thank you. Just a yay or nay is all we need, but thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Jen,
Nay.
Gary,
Yes.
Jen Mullen.
Jen, can you repeat that?
Nay.
Nay. Okay. Chris,
Nay.
and Dr. Young.
Nay.
Okay, so that goes back to Carrie.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 4 yays. 1, 2, 3. We have 4 yays and 4 nays, and 1 person abstained.
So I'm the tiebreaker?
You're the tiebreaker.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, Miriam, next.
In the 580 count, and Mike, I will say that the numbers, the 2019, 2020 numbers, I do understand are decreased because of the few months that we had with COVID. So this is conference travel general. In 18-19, we had $65,683 expended. In 19-20, $43,022.78. We budgeted $76,353. That's a big increase again. It's only a little over $2,000, $2,500 more than we budgeted this year, but we know we didn't use that money. And so I'm suggesting that we cut $7,000 from that budget, leaving $68,718, which is still 38% above what we spent in 19-20.
Is that in the form of a motion or?
Yes, I move that.
Okay, so is there a second?
Could you give me the motion and what number are we on exactly?
I move that we cut from account 580 conference travel general 10%, which is $7,635, leaving in the account $68,718, or a 38% increase over what we spent in 19-20.
I second the motion.
Okay, first and seconded by Liz. Discussion, please. Any discussion from the board? Anybody from administration want to opine on that?
I just think the board just has to continuously consider that as you whittle these counts down over year in terms of what we offer, eventually what can happen is we're thin on our staffing model. We scrutinize these accounts to certain elements, and I'm not saying the scrutiny isn't appropriate. It's very appropriate, and there's some very good points that are being made here. Over time, with a very thin budget that the Ellington Public Schools have, there's not going to be room to move and have 2.5% budgets, or it's going to be highly unlikely without cutting positions and impacting programs. It's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher as times go on. And so I just point that out, and I think it's a legitimate thing, because you do this over 4, 5, 6 years. That's where you find yourselves, and then the conversations change dramatically. And so I would just keep that in mind when you say 10%, or you just have just general cuts that cut into these accounts. The money gets spent for good purposes that are investments in a wide variety of things that you all value greatly. So just to keep that into mind when you're thinking about this.
Thank you, Dr. Nickel. And if I may, just as a point of clarification, I know there's some other hands that, Liz, you have one, and maybe there's
I'm
others, but that's okay. If I just, again, Miriam, from a financial standpoint, what you're proposing is based upon utilization. And that's where that's the logic behind some of the at least in this one and in the past one. You're looking at what was budgeted, you're looking at what was actually expended, and you're making a recommendation in the form of a motion for the board to consider that's actually not cutting it back to a level that's below the utilization, but actually almost at a 40% increase above utilization. So I think that's a good point to make, and if I'm understanding your logic correctly, and I understand what Dr. Nichols says, he's looking for some room to maneuver, but is there an explanation as to the actual numbers that we're seeing that Miriam has talked about that the board could take into its consideration before we call it to a vote, that maybe could change people's minds on it? Maybe Brian or Scott?
Before Brian Greenleaf answers that, I appreciate that, Mike. If we're going to be looking at the kind of expenditures and making cuts by that, we may be wanting to think about a longer trend history of the expending of the accounts. A lot of times, and even when money's appropriated to us in all of these areas, when we go to implement this on an annual basis, we scrutinize it to make sure it's money spent really, really well. We just don't spend it to say, well, we have another $20,000 in this account. Please, 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 people, go to a conference. If the conference is needed, we do it. And so it varies over a significant amount of time. And then what invariably happens, and this happens on a regular basis, is when we scrutinize and make it and challenge appropriately to make sure that money is spent well, and when accounts are underspended, we also overspend on certain accounts for certain issues that we know are very important for us to invest in. And so all of a sudden you have an account that we overexpend by $25,000, but the reason we can, and the reason there's flexibility and the board wants us or the teachers want us to do X, Y, or Z, we say, we can take care of it. We can do that. If we start to kind of just make cuts based on 2-year track record of accounts, all of a sudden different things are going to occur where we're not going to be able to transfer funds and not be able to take care of it. I'll give you a perfect example. 2 years ago, we were able to not go back to the town for money. We were able to spend $35,000 patching the roof over at Center School. And that was going to be a major issue with water leaking into the classrooms. The reason we were going to be able to do this is part and parcel of all of these different situations where we manage the accounts well. And when larger transfers need to occur, that's when we report those out at the Finance Committee.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, because these do vary over time, and I think Scott's right about, they do have to be looked at in the much broader context of the entire budget, because right now we don't have any, and this is something that's actually been highlighted, I think, by Scott at previous budget presentations in January, is we don't have any funding in equipment, we don't have any funding in furniture. And so historically, any funding that's been directed towards those have come from other places where we might have a little bit of operational supply. I'd certainly be more comfortable, just from a programmatic standpoint, thinking about the long-term finances of the district. If we wanted to say, well, let's cut the 580 account by $7,500, but let's add that $7,500 into equipment and furniture, so that we can fund that over time as well. Because if we just do the cut, the worry is that over time we're not going to be able to do those expenditure accounts.
Right. If you look at the, remember in the budget book, every year, we give you the list of things that are not included in the budget that are equipment. And we basically, they're pre-purchased if we can afford them, if things go well. Most of that has been equipment that we've been purchasing that goes directly to kids and teachers. And so that doesn't happen every year, and it varies from year to year what we're able to spend. But if these other accounts and get whittled down, that list is going to start not being something we can expend money on to close out the school year. Sometimes we close out with more money. Sometimes we don't close out with a lot. It depends and it varies. We've also given a lot back to the town over the years. And so just something to consider of how the budget kind of has unfolded over the years to ensure that we fund all the areas that we need to fund.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nickel and Brian Greenleaf. Miriam?
Well, I'd like to make it clear that I'm really not the wallpaper on the wall, but particularly for this year when there is so much economic uncertainty and families are looking at so much economic uncertainty, I really would think that it's important for us as a board to come in with as lean a budget as possible. And I could almost guarantee you, Scott, that I won't be such a penny pincher next year because I think that the economic situation will be better. But I considered earlier whether to bring forward these, and then I decided that I was going to, because this means a lot as a taxpayer in town. We just got our reevaluation, or I got mine, which means that some people's taxes are going up. And I think it's important that we try and lower this budget as much as possible for this year. So that's where my focus is coming from. I got my reassessment yesterday, and I'm sure a lot of us did.
And I appreciate that, Miriam. My point is not for this year or next year. My point is the cumulative effect of a process over time is what I want. I just want the board to be well informed so that when we're having these conversations at a meeting like this 3-4 years from now, and the challenges of the budget are great, and we're having trouble getting below 3%, and we have little wiggle room, and then we're sitting there talking about, well, we're going to have to cut a music teacher or whatever. That's what I want us to avoid. That's what a lot of districts are in. And then they have the conversations about cutting middle school sports and all of those sorts of things. We haven't had to have those conversations. As superintendent, I'm happy, whatever decisions you want to make, I'm happy with. But I actually feel it's the duty of the superintendent to make sure that the board is very clearly understanding. I'm thinking about not only short term, I'm thinking about long term. And this is about the programming of kids and teachers. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Nickel. Miriam, your hand's up. Is that from before, or do you have any additional comments to make? Nope. Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion. We have a second. Brian Greenleaf, can you just review what was the dollar value for the motion? Was it 7,000?
$7,635.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Jen Brown, can you do a roll call again, please? I'm going to call this to vote.
No problem. So, Miriam.
Aye.
Carrie.
Aye.
Marcia.
Aye.
Liz.
Aye.
Jen Zen.
Aye.
Gary.
Nay.
Jen Mullen. What can you say that one more time?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, thank you. Chris.
Nay.
And Dr. Young.
Nay.
We have the ayes have 5 and the nays have 4.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Miriam? You still have the floor.
From page 54, this is a 610 supplies account. In 1819, our actual was $661,340. In 1920, we spent $533,150. In 21-22, we're asking for $740,070. The same thing, a 10% cut, which would be up 25% from what we actually spent in 2019-2020. And so I would move that we cut the 610 account by 10% or $74,000.
I second it.
Who is the second?
Marcia.
Marcia, okay. Discussion. Mr. Greenleaf.
Yeah, I think again, those are totally, looking at the numbers, totally rational justification there. I will say, you guys did hear in December about the budget process that goes on at the schools. These mostly represent school-based accounts. And, listening to the teachers and listening to the administrators about how they put their process together as to what is needed. So just something to consider there. The other thing is, I'll just repeat it again. I know that the school principals work with their teams to administer their accounts in total. And oftentimes these are the accounts that get moved to equipment requests over time. And so, if you want to cut the supplies account by $70,000, my recommendation would be to consider adding some or all of that into the equipment and furniture accounts, so that the long-term programmatic level that we've been able to fund over the past few years is maintained.
Good, and thank you, Mr. Greenleaf. I'd like to make a comment and then turn it to Jen Mullen, whose hand is raised. I understand and appreciate what Dr. Nichols says, and I think the board has to take his comments seriously about allowing some room within the budget to make certain strategic operational decisions. I am a little concerned, though, and again, this is not a criticism, but I think a change in culture that I think the board needs to have a broader conversation, maybe through the finance committee on. If the money's going to the equipment line item, we should budget for it in the equipment line item. And I'd rather see that happen up front than say that it's going to be in another line item that we're just learning about now, that we're potentially making a cut on based upon previous year utilization, only to find out that it's being transferred into other accounts that we could be doing harm on. So I want to thank you, Scott and Brian, for being up front. Liz, can you close your mic?
I'm sorry.
That's
so
okay.
sorry.
And God bless you if that was a sneeze. But I think that's a broader conversation, more from a budgeting process standpoint. I think the finance committee can help support the administration in that change. Totally understand where you guys are coming from. I appreciate you being honest about it. I don't want us to do harm. I don't think any board member here wants to do any harm. So I hear what you're saying, but it actually makes me have more questions about what we're buying in equipment. And I want to learn more about that now before we start making additional strategic adjustments based purely on utilization from what's being presented. So I do think we need to consider that in our decision-making process. And so with that, let's have additional conversation. Jen Mullen, Carrie, and then Chris, and I know Dr. Nickel looks like he wants to make a comment as well. In that order.
I have just some concerns about cutting supplies after that was one of the items that we had heard from when we did talk to, and we invited the teachers and the principals in and stuff like that. One of the biggest concerns was they are spending a lot of out-of-pocket money and stuff like that. So again, this would take a lot of convincing for me. That's it.
Thank you, Jen. Next comment, Carrie Socha.
Thank you. I agree with you, Mike. I think that I need to know what's being cut, what's not being cut. If it's equipment that, Miriam's questioning this one line item, and then it's like, well, if we want equipment or furniture or whatnot, that doesn't really address this particular line item. So I would just rather, we went through this a few years ago with making sure each thing was separated out so we understood exactly where the money's going. And I feel like we're going a little backwards here, that we need to know what we're budgeting specifically for. So if that's being cut, if we're cutting something, then it's like, oh, we don't realize we're cutting furniture, or we don't realize we're cutting for something else we need. It just makes me question it, like other things as well. So I would echo what Mike had to say, and I have the same concerns.
Mr. Picaro?
Go ahead, Dr. Nickel.
I appreciate all the comments. To be clear, we're not doing a supply account for, say, 50,000 and saying, oh, we only need 30 and the other 20s for furniture, and we don't just put it into an equipment account or a furniture account. We're not doing that. That's not how we're operating. Our equipment account has been low for years since I came here. We haven't built that account up. We've reported it out every single budget season to say our equipment account is low. And then we have put all the equipment that has been requested into the pre-purchase grants or final expenditures money on an annual basis and reported that out every single year when we were able to do it. The reason that sometimes we underexpend certain accounts, and it varies from year to year to year over time, is because we do a great job at managing the money. So if we say an account is $50,000 for supplies, and it's pretty standard over 5 years, and it's been at 50,000 or 52,000 or what have you, and sometimes we spend 65 in it, or sometimes we spend 45 in it or 30 in it, it's because we overly scrutinize the spending. We just don't say 50,000 and then we spend the 50,000 no matter what. So it's not about us saying, oh, we have all this hidden equipment in all of these other different accounts. We're not doing that. That's not how we budget. But the budget, the technology, equipment accounts have been basically non-existent before I came, if you go back and look at the history. So we've decided when we've tried to come in with budgets that have been under 3% overall, we've decided not to try to build up those accounts and see if we can get that equipment different ways. So it's not a shell game at all. It's a transparent way we've been budgeting 4, 5, 6 years. If we want to kind of shift that around, the answer is not necessarily going to be, let's take 20 from this account, 30 from this account, 40 from this account, and 20 from this other account and put it into a equipment account, because that's not going to work. We're going to have to build up the equipment account over time and keep those other accounts fairly steady, because pretty soon it's not about padding and wiggle room. It's about not being able to make strategic maneuvering based on the needs of a school district on a $40 million budget that shifts on an annual basis, even with great budgeting that is precise. So I just want to make that clear of how we've gone about doing this.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate that and all the financial management that you and Brian and your team do, and it's valued immensely. So thank you. The next one is Jen. I think, are you all set, Jen Mullen? You're back on the top of the list. I hope I'm taking everything in order here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I took it down.
Okay, Chris, you're next.
I just want to say that I don't think we should be nickel and diming tangible supplies. I think our principals and our administration and our teachers, I think they know what they need in supplies. I don't think they're padding it in any way. And I just think that could be demoralizing, to say the least. And then also a point of order, since I have the floor for a moment, 5 minutes, and we're going to have to make a motion to extend the meeting because this meeting should end by 9 o'clock. according to our bylaw.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, next, and we'll be mindful of the time. Scott, did you want to speak again?
No, thank you for asking.
Okay, I saw the hands up. And Michael Verderame, you have to put your hand down because this is only for board discussion, not for anyone else. But
Yeah, I didn't mean to hit that. I apologize. That was an accident.
That's all right. It's good to talk. Good to hear from you, Mike. Thanks for hanging on this long and listening.
That was actually my 8-year-old, but I'll let him know not to touch that again.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the board? No. Okay. Jen, can you do a roll call vote, please? And then we're going to pause to take to address.
Wait,
Chris.
Mike, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Can I ask one more question?
yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jen.
The line item 610 supplies the program development K through 8 EDS. Can you just explain what that is?
You know what, Jen, if I may, I do think we're gonna go over our time if we continue the discussion.
Oh, sorry.
So no, that's okay. Chris, I'm going to turn to you just from a Robert's Rules of Order. We're in the middle of a vote. Could we pause and then vote while we're in the middle of a vote? I just want to make sure we do this by the book as far as our process goes. Or Scott?
I think we need to take the vote on the table before we introduce a new motion, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Any input on that, Scott? Do we have to address this? If we go over our time, is it going to invalidate our vote?
It's not. It's an okay risk to go over 30 seconds to a minute. I don't think anyone's going to challenge us. I think you're good.
All right, very good. Let's continue then the discussion. We'll call it to a roll call vote, and then Chris will address it in a new motion to extend time. Go ahead, Jen Zen.
I'm just wondering if you can tell me what the program development K through 8 EDS, what is that?
Brian Henderson, are you there? That's an educational services.
That's the focus on STEM enrichment supplies.
And the $12,000 increase there is based on?
That would be supplementing a lot of the STEM enrichment activities we would like to introduce and make more vibrant. You did hear some of our work with the makerspace and to have things be more robust. Going back to that the enrichment parent forum from the previous year, lots of discussions on like hour of code, not just have that, one off a year. How do we have more of the robotics integrated into the enrichment, and that there's a cost to purchase those, robotics equipment and other equipment for STEM activities.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think Mike's son has raised his hand again. That's great. All right, let's call a roll call. Jen
Sure.
Brown.
Yep. Miriam.
Aye.
Carrie.
Come back to me. I'm thinking.
Sure. Marcia.
Well, I know I seconded this motion, but after listening to all this discussion, I don't know, so I'm abstaining again.
Okay. Liz.
Liz?
Unmute Liz.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Jen Zen.
You're going to have to come back to me. Sorry, Jen.
No problem. Gary.
No.
Okay. Jen Mullen.
What was that?
Nay.
No.
Oh, no.
Okay. Chris.
Nay.
Dr. Young.
Nay.
Okay, so now we're back to Carrie.
I think if well, I know I'm only supposed to say what I'm voting, but I think if the dollars were the percentage was lower, then I could support it. But I'm gonna say nay at this time.
Okay, Jen Zen.
Nay.
Okay, the nays have it.
Okay, thank you. The motion fails. Let's Miriam, you still have the floor, but if I may respectfully just address the issue of our time limit. Chris, did you want to make a motion to extend?
No, I wouldn't mind making a motion to adjourn because I haven't had dinner yet. So I'm making a motion.
I really have one big thing I want to make sure I get in tonight. So I would like to make a motion that we extend.
How long?
I don't know how long. Is there a special time? Maybe 20 minutes?
Yeah, why don't you extend for up to 30 minutes? But I have a feeling we're going to be bringing this to a close very soon, and we'll pick it up. We'll pick it up next week as well.
All right. So I'll make a motion to extend for 30 minutes.
Up to, yep.
Up to 30 minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Jen Zen. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Yay.
Okay. No extension. All right, so we're extended. I know it's been a long night so far. We've done a lot of great work. Brian Greenleaf, can you give us a quick recap of where are we by the numbers, please?
Yep. So we are with the two additional motions that have passed since the last readout. We've gone from 2.85 to 2.81. Okay,
thank you. So again, the board's pleasure. I do believe we still have a lot of ground to cover. I know there's a lot of other questions. Liz has made indication she's got some areas. Carrie, I believe Jen Zen may have some others as well. I certainly have some more areas. I think this is a lot of good work for tonight. We certainly could, not a lot of hands up. Okay, so that's good. We could certainly make a motion and pick up. Scott, do we have another meeting set? I don't believe we do at this point. So we'd have to set another meeting from if whatever we don't finish tonight and continue next week. Is that correct? With the hopes that we can get this in before the next board meeting.
Correct. We'd have to look at next week.
Yeah, okay. Just a point of order. They are due by charter to the town by February 15th. Administratively, because the 15th is a Sunday, they want it by Friday the 12th, I think it is.
Okay, so technically by charter, it's due the 15th. Our board meeting is the 17th. So if we do another budget meeting, we'd be looking to vote and make this the board's budget to send over to the Board of Finance. Okay. So we may not, we'll have to see what the timing is as far as next week's meeting. All right, a lot of hands up. Miriam, you still have the floor, but if I may respectfully, Carrie, Chris, Miriam, okay, Carrie, Chris, Liz. Go ahead, Carrie.
I think that Miriam's done a lot of really good work, and what I said in the motion is I don't know if other board members would feel the same. I think if it wasn't a 10% decrease on that line item, that it just seemed like a lot at $70,000 plus to cut the supplies. So I don't know if the board would entertain a less percentage cut on that line item that Miriam was referring to.
Michael, I'd accept that number as a friendly amendment.
Well, no, the motion has already failed, so there's nothing to amend. But the board, you could try the board's mind and offer a new motion at a different number if that's your pleasure. But Marion, before we get to you, Carrie, you're all done. Chris is next, then Liz, and then we can start again after that. So Chris.
I'm sorry, but my phone is ringing right this moment.
Call from Joe.
We'll come back to you, Chris. Okay. We'll wait.
Okay. My question was on student services outside tuition and transportation. There is an unassigned placement. Is it super risky to not budget for that unassigned placement? Also, the unanticipated DCF and court placement. that's budgeted for as well. And I was just wondering how risky it would be to remove those or decrease those from the budget.
Good question, Chris. Scott or Brian?
Yeah, I don't know if Dr. Laporte is on here too. We always do build in one kind of additional outplacement. That's because, we look at the cases that we have in the district, both those in current outplacement and then those that are in the pipeline for outplacement. And so, I think if I recall correctly, we probably had, without getting into any details, obviously, I think we probably had 2 to 3 students in the pipeline that Christy and her team are working hard to keep in the district, but that are, certainly presenting challenges there. And so that's why we've included that. And then you always have the, risk that somebody moves in from another town that has services, which has happened to us within the past 5 years. That is the reason that we went to the Board of Finance last night to make sure that the $150,000 in the unexpended funds account is still there. So there's a risk. Is it an undue risk? I think that's going to have to be judged on by the board. But there are definitely potentials for kids that are not currently out to go out.
Chris, you all set? Okay. Liz?
Yeah, I'd like to look at the electricity account. I mean, I drive past Windermere, and Carrie, you probably do too, and every single light is on all night long in those buildings. And I'm wondering if we could have them turn off some of the lights because
Yeah, so I will certainly look into that. We've done some energy savings projects over the last, really about 5 years ago. And, that's, they're not supposed to be on all night. They're supposed to shut off on automatic timers. And so, we can certainly do a kind of an audit there and make sure that those systems are working properly. I will say just generally, if I may, about the electricity accounts, we did cut those again this year. They were cut last year. If you had to ask me about the one area of the budget before tonight with health insurance that I was most worried about, I would have said probably my electricity projections because I'm basing them a little bit off of the reduction that happened through COVID. And there was also an increase that happened last December in the rate. And so if I had to say one area that I would really, 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 really avoid touching, it would be electricity.
But I'm kind of wondering, there's one of those lights supposed to go off, and is that happening in all the schools? Because they've got to be using up an awful lot of electricity.
Yeah, again, I'll check into the systems, but my understanding and having walked through some of the schools, at later night, they're supposed to shut off when there's no motion. And I can check into that. Now, obviously, our custodial teams are working until 10:30 at night. And so certainly after that, they should be completely off.
Brian, if you could do a quick audit to Liz's part, again, before our next budget meeting, I think that would be helpful in informing the board.
Either way, I would not recommend touching the electricity accounts.
Anything else?
Goodness, he's awfully bright there, but.
Okay. Okay, no other hands up at this time. Miriam, you technically still had the floor, and I apologize for not getting it back to you so quickly. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any other business that we needed to address. But did you want to continue at this point, or do you want to?
Yes, there's just one more, Mike. It's a small amount, but I'd like to move forward with the 810 accountant. I'd like to move that we cut 10% from that account, and I'll explain after I get a second. I guess that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Is there a second for discussion? Second by Carrie. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. In 1819, we spent actually $57,784. In 1920, we spent $15,605. This year, we are budgeting $64,493. I'm proposing a cut of 10% or $6,493, leaving $58,000 in the account, which is 270% above what we spent in 1920. I know it's only $6,000, but it's just on a matter of principle.
What account is she talking about besides the number?
810.
I know, but what
Dues
is?
Dues and fees, Marcia.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Let's see which hands are raised, and go ahead, Brian Greenleaf.
Yeah, sorry. So I think I'm gonna try and pull this up really quickly. I think there was actually an error when we imported the account numbers into the new system, because it looks like on the page 57 there, 810 dues and fees central office, that there was no expenditure out of that account last year. I'm going to quickly double check that one for you. My guess is that there was close to the $39,000 there. Let me just see if I can do that real quick for you on the fly. But barring that, again, this is, an account that we look at. Those numbers reflect, both opportunities for administrators, in some cases opportunities for teachers, also district wide accounts as well, such as participation in CABE, participation in NEASC at the high school. And so, there definitely would be an issue were we to cut that and not have the appropriate funds.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Other comments? Okay, Jen Brown, I'm going to call it to vote, please. Roll call.
Okay, you got it. Miriam? Oh, wait. Yep, next. Okay, Carrie?
Yay.
Marcia?
Yay.
Liz?
Yay.
Jen Zen?
I'd like to know what that 1920 number was. So,
Jen, we can't.
Okay. Sorry. Yep. I'm abstaining.
Gary?
Nay.
Jen Mullen?
Nay.
Chris?
Nay.
And Dr. Young?
Yay, yes.
The ayes have it.
Okay, great. And the motion passes. Thank you. At this point, again, I think we've been doing this for a while. Do we want to take a break and continue at our next budget meeting, or do we want to continue on tonight? If so, look, Gary's given us the signal. He's had enough. Now that you have high definition broadband, we can see everything you say, Gary. So maybe we take a pause. Gary, make a motion to adjourn then, if you'd like, and we could pick this up at the next meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Carrie.
Can we just find out what the end number is right now?
Sure. We have discussion. Brian, you want to give us that number before we adjourn?
Yep, that motion took us from 2.81 to 2.79.
And can I also ask if that number may be suitable to?
Mike, just a point of order that we have a motion on the table to adjourn.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you continue this discussion, I'm going to have to make a motion that you're out of order.
Yep, agreed, Dr. Young. So we have a first, we have a second. Any additional discussion about adjourning? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, folks, we are adjourned. Good work tonight. Thank you very much. And a meeting notice will be coming out for our next meeting next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, administrators.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a good night.